Hello everyone. Welcome to Frightening Tales. I know many of you enjoy listening to these videos as you fall asleep. So, before you drift off, I'd love for you to leave a comment letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from. And, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Alright, now let's get comfortable, relax, and dive into tonight's case. Story 1. A marriage scam in Japan involving a staggering 4 billion yen has set social media ablaze. A prominent investment mogul has sued his former lover, Nakamoto Himika, dubbed Japan's most beautiful hostess, accusing her of exploiting their relationship under the guise of marriage to extort gifts worth 4 billion yen, roughly 27 million US, while damaging his social reputation. He relentlessly exposed her alleged scandals from fraud and tax evasion to other notorious behaviors. However, the mogul's true face as the mastermind of a Ponzi scheme has also come to light. What initially seemed like a tale of a lovesick man deceived by a bar hostess turned out to be far more complex. Neither party is as innocent as they appear. Let's dive into the details of this case involving the woman known as Japan's most beautiful hostess, Osaka's little devil, and the top hostess of the Raya era, Nakamoto Himika. We'll also take a closer look at Japan's hostess industry and the secrets lurking behind this profession. Hostesses in Japan undertake a unique role, primarily working in upscale nightclubs or bars. Their main duties involve engaging with clients, conversing, drinking together, and creating a relaxed, enjoyable atmosphere. The job demands not only an appealing appearance and demeanor, but also exceptional communication skills and emotional intelligence to meet clients' social needs. It's a role that requires significant emotional labor and advanced social finesse. In Japanese society, the hostess profession elicits mixed opinions. Supporters argue it's a legitimate form of entertainment, while critics contend that the industry's hyper-commercialization can negatively impact women's image. Nevertheless, some hostesses rise to the top through hard work and charisma, becoming industry stars, building personal brands, and even branching into fields like fashion or business. These success stories have somewhat shifted societal perceptions, showing that with dedication, the profession can be a pathway to achievement. Now, let's turn to Nakamoto Himika, a standout figure in this wave. She entered the hostess world with the aura of a wealthy Aries. Within just 3 months, she became the top earner at her club, even setting a record by generating over 100 million yen, about 675,000. In just 12 hours, repeatedly breaking industry benchmarks. On Instagram, Himika boasts over 800,000 followers and on TikTok 550,000. Beyond hostessing, she's a social media influencer, inspiring many young women who see her as a symbol of success. Himika, born Nakamoto Himika on October 27, 2000, hails from a wealthy family in Ho Prefecture, Japan. Her father, Nakamoto Shisaku, is a businessman and CEO of Dean PLO, a company specializing in imported luxury cars like Mercedes-Benz and Porsche. He also sponsors Porsche-related sports events, such as the Porsche Cup and Porsche Championship, and oversees multiple companies with extensive business operations. Raised in such a family, Hima enjoyed a life of material abundance from a young age. She traveled in luxury cars and attended prestigious private aristocratic schools in the region with a guaranteed academic path that didn't require entrance exams. In affluent families like hers, sending children to study abroad is common. However, Himika chose not to follow the path her parents had laid out. Realizing she wasn't academically gifted and craving a different life, she decided to forge her own future. During high school, Himika joined the entertainment agency of X and competed in the 2015 Tokyo Girls Collection, reaching the semi-finals. Despite her strong showing, the final results fell short of expectations and opposition from her school forced her to withdraw. She then started working part-time at a barbecue restaurant where her striking appearance drew crowds, some traveling long distances just to see her. This experience made Himika realize she possessed a unique charm and talent. After graduating high school, she enrolled at Chicago Women's Junior College. During this time, she worked at the barbecue restaurant for about 3 years, gradually growing bored with the routine part-time job and yearning for new challenges. By chance, she learned about Club Rams, an upscale nightclub in Osaka's Koshinai district owned by Ace Group. The club's operator, Noah, was a young female president who had been a renowned hostess herself before retiring at 23 to take the helm. Noah had achieved remarkable business success with annual revenues reaching 10 billion yen, around 67 million US. Himika began working part-time at Club Reims in 2018. She didn't tell her parents about her foray into the nightlife entertainment industry, instead lying that she was working at a karaoke bar, but since she still lived at home, the truth soon came out. Emma's mother was furious, insisting the family wasn't short on money and could support her financially if needed, demanding she quit immediately. Her father issued a stern warning as well. Her mother even declared that if Ama wanted to continue in the industry, she'd have to move out and live independently within a month. At 18, found the nightlife entertainment world alluring, not just for the money, but for values far beyond material wealth. At Club Reims, she was exposed to an entirely new world, regularly meeting successful entrepreneurs and high-profile individuals she'd never encounter in a typical university life. Everything about the nightclub sparked her curiosity and excitement. So, Hima moved out, and in her second year of college, she deferred her studies to dedicate herself fully to the industry. In an interview, Himika once shared that when she started, she didn't set specific goals like becoming a famous hostess, standing out, or earning a fortune. Instead, her main drive was curiosity about society and a desire to experience different facets of life, approaching the industry with a mindset of learning. But the deeper she delved into the industry, the more her interest and ambition grew. Within 3 months of starting, she quickly became the club's standout performer. Notably, Himika entered the industry at 18, not yet of legal drinking age in Japan, so she couldn't drink alcohol. However, she realized this was actually a significant advantage. Many clients visit nightclubs not just to drink, but to enjoy a relaxing atmosphere. Such clients were often impressed by and more supportive of the efforts of new staff like her, offering encouragement that fueled her rise. Emma's reputation spread rapidly within the industry. To boost her visibility and attract high-end clients to the club, she actively built her presence on platforms like TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram, sharing glimpses of her daily life and fashion sense, quickly amassing a large following. Himika also became an exclusive model for Little Devil A magazine, earning the nickname Osaka's Little Devil. The magazine's primary readership, girls aged 13 to 20, frequently voted her as their favorite cover model, making her an idol to many young women. The magazine even hosted a fan meet and greeted event just for her. Since 2021, Himika has consistently appeared on the runway at the Konkei Fashion Show, the largest fashion event in the Konkei region, and served as an ambassador for several renowned fashion brands. With a beauty and physique rivaling top supermodels, her fame soared. Her celebrity status also landed her appearances on television programs, solidifying her place in the entertainment world. Himika's extraordinary appeal brought incredible revenue to the nightclub, attracting not just men, but also women eager to meet her. Among her fans were even many underage schoolgirls. After seeing her glamorous image in magazines and on TV, these young girls began dreaming of becoming hostesses themselves. This trend raised concerns that such a lavish lifestyle might negatively influence young girls' values. To counter this, Himika often showcased a relatable, down-to-earth side on social media. She emphasized that her nightclub work and real life were two separate worlds. Himika enjoyed shopping, traveling with high school friends, wearing affordable clothes, and living a simple life, helping her maintain a grounded perspective on money. Himika stated that all the luxury items she owned were bought with her hard-earned money as a reward for her relentless efforts. This approach not only highlighted her diligence, but also earned her fans admiration and recognition, garnering widespread praise. In April 2022, Himika moved from Club Rams to Club Rays, immediately making a splash. On her first day, she generated a personal revenue of 53 million yen, about $360,000. After the switch, she continued to achieve remarkable results with her 2022 and 2023 revenues both surpassing 1 billion yen, roughly $6.7 million each year. These feats left fans in awe, dubbing her unbeatable Himika and adding a new chapter to Club Ray's legacy. Having reached an unparalleled peak as a top-tier hostess, Himika decided to embark on a new phase of her life. On October 2, 2023, she announced her retirement on social media, sharing that she had poured her heart and passion into the job. However, she felt she no longer had new goals to chase in the industry and chose to retire to explore a different version of herself. From October 26 to 28 that year, Himika held her final birthday event before retiring. In just 3 days, she achieved a record-breaking revenue of 500 million yen, around $3.40 4 million US, closing her illustrious career as the queen of hostesses. Following the event, Himika took a 3-month hiatus, traveling the world and indulging in her love for poker tournaments. Even during her break, she stayed connected with fans, posting videos and photos. Given her established reputation in modeling, many predicted she'd pivot to fashion or entertainment post-retirement. However, Himika had once stated that the nightclub was where she truly belonged. Upon retiring, she expressed gratitude to Ace Group for helping her grow and achieve proud milestones in her career. She affirmed her intention to remain tied to Ace Group in a new capacity. Ace Group, led by Chairman Ayata Takashi and nightclub representative Kusumoto, had long recognized Himika's influence in the high-end hostess industry. They repeatedly persuaded her to take on the role of president of Club Rays, hoping to leverage her public appeal and experience to breathe new life into the establishment. Though she lacked management experience, Himika's decisive personality and willingness to embrace challenges led her to accept the position with enthusiasm, determined to continue shining in the industry. On February 11, 2024, at 11:29 a.m., Himika appeared with a fresh short haircut and an elegant black suit. She emphasized that this wasn't an impulsive decision, but the result of careful consideration. The role of a manager is different from that of a performer, and I thought deeply before making this choice. But once I decided, I'll give it my all. I hope everyone will continue to support me, she said. Her speech exuded confidence and the professional demeanor of a formidable businesswoman. Thus, Himika became the second person after the legendary Noah to assume the presidency at age 23, marking a new chapter in her career. From a top hostess, she stepped onto an entirely new stage as a female president. Though she moved behind the scenes, Himika retained her allure with many loyal clients visiting the club almost daily to support her. However, just as her new career began to stabilize, a storm of scandal erupted. About 6 months after taking office, her ex-boyfriend and primary sponsor, Kikuka Show, posted a serious accusation on social media, claiming Himika had deceived him with a fake promise of marriage. This sparked a fierce wave of debate. Kikuka further alleged that Himika's entire persona was fabricated. Kikuka claimed Himika wasn't the wealthy Aries she portrayed herself as, but an ordinary materialistic woman. Despite Himika's assertions that she'd never had plastic surgery, Kikuka revealed that her appearance and figure had been surgically enhanced, including a breast augmentation. He funded for 2.7 million yen, about $18,000. He also accused her of engaging in overnight escort services and reported her to Japan's tax authorities for allegedly failing to declare taxes on billions of yen in income. Kikuka demanded a thorough investigation into her tax evasion. This barrage of accusations thrust Himika into the eye of a public storm, facing relentless criticism. In September 2024, Himika was invited as a guest on the talk show Explosive Information Summit hosted by MC Koji Amada. When asked about her highest single-day earnings, Himika replied calmly around 2 to 3 billion yen. This statement immediately ignited a firestorm of controversy. Before the episode aired, viewers sent letters of protest to the network, arguing that Himika's controversial image could negatively influence young people and urging the show not to feature her on public broadcasts. The network responded that Kikuka's allegations against Himika were at that point unproven suspicions. Thus, the episode aired as planned on September 21. Beyond being Himika's ex-boyfriend, Kikuka Show, a major nightclub patron, was no ordinary figure. Before delving into his accusations, let's explore who Kikuka Show really is. Kikuka was born in 1977 in Hokkaido and is currently 47 years old. He doesn't have an advanced educational background, having only graduated from a specialized school in Tokyo before returning to his hometown to build his career. Kikuka self-taught Forex trading for 6.5 years, achieving a remarkable record in 2009. With a profit rate of over 2,500% in just 15 days, earning him the title of a trading genius. In 2011, he began working as a forex trader for a private fund in Japan. By 2013, he established a company in the UK, and the following year, he joined a foreign securities firm as a forex trader. In 2015, he founded SIA, followed by SIA Private Limited in 2019. Kikuchi held significant roles such as CEO and CTO at various international companies, achieving considerable success in the investment sector. His annual income is estimated to range between 1 and 4 billion yen, approximately 6.7 to 27 million US. Yet, Kikuchi Sho is a deeply controversial figure. Known as a flamboyant playboy, he has a particular fondness for hostesses. Besides Himika, he has dated other prominent hostesses like Eikayo Hibiki and Natsume Kokoro. His current girlfriend Erika is also a well-known hostess. Kikuchi is renowned for his lavish spending, often sharing images on social media of luxury cars, high-end brands, and an opulent lifestyle. However, he's also entangled in multiple lawsuits, which we'll explore later. In late August 2024, Kikuchi posted a series of lengthy Instagram posts that sent shockwaves through the public. In a post exceeding 2,000 words, he publicly accused Himika of deceiving him emotionally and committing marriage fraud. Kikuchi revealed that their relationship began on March 20, 2021 with plans to marry. In October 2021, Himika suddenly expressed her intent to retire. To show support, Kikuchi prepared 1,000 bottles of premium champagne worth over 100 million yen, about $675,000, as a gift. But just days before her birthday event, Himika returned the champagne, saying she couldn't retire at that time. Kikuchi expressed understanding and respected her decision. However, he began questioning whether to continue the relationship. At this point, Himika promised she would definitely retire before her 2022 birthday event. This assurance kept their relationship alive for a while longer. In his post, Kikuchi pointed out that from November 2021, the quantity, value, and frequency of champagne at Himika's birthday events, along with a significant increase in money and gifts, were all funded by him. Himika had claimed on her personal channels that she earned her money and bought luxury items through her own efforts. But Kikuchi revealed that over 90% of these were gifts from him. Himika further used the promise of "we'll marry after I retire" to gain Kikuchi's unwavering trust, prompting him to spend lavishly at the nightclub, buying expensive champagne to help her maintain her top spot in the industry. Kikuchi also claimed that Himika's appearances at the Concave Fashion Show and her nationwide fame in Japan were due to his financial support and arrangements. However, Himika grew arrogant, believing, "All the recognition I get from the world is due to my exceptional talent." This made Kikuchi worry whether she would keep her promise. In mid-April 2022, just before Club Ra's opening, Kikuchi met privately with Ace Group chairman Iyata Takashi, asking him to convince Himika to retire. Iyata reportedly agreed to help, giving Kikuchi some reassurance to ensure Himika's retirement event was grand. Kikuchi personally attended her farewell at Club Reims, contributing over 100 million yen in revenue over 3 days. To ease Himika's concerns about life after retirement, Kikuki provided additional support. He gifted her expensive items like watches, clothes, and handbags, organized extravagant trips, and transferred 20 million yen, about $135,000 into her personal account for living expenses, ensuring she faced no financial hardship. Kikuki even spent generously on Himika's friends and family. But in early September 2022, Himika told him she couldn't retire because her father objected. Kikuki revealed that by then he had spent nearly 4 billion yen, around 27 million US on Himika, including money, gifts, and the sacrifice of his social reputation. Just 2 months later, Ace Group banned him from entering any of their nightclubs. On January 14, 2023, Himika sent Kikuki a message before immediately blocking him. It was then that Kikuki realized her promises were a scam. He posted a lengthy expose, followed by continuous Instagram stories sharing evidence like photos, videos, and conversations from their time together, sparking a massive online debate. In his post, Kikuki emphasized that his goal wasn't to reclaim money or assets. He hadn't demanded any repayment. He claimed his story aimed to serve Japan's public interest, protecting youth from negative influences, promoting tax compliance, preventing tax evasion, and combating emotional fraud and illegal gambling. Rumors suggest Kikuki's decision to go public stemmed from a chance encounter with Himika's father, Nakamoto Shisaku, at a sushi restaurant, where he felt disrespected, prompting a vengeful response. However, Himika and Kikuki's relationship had ended over a year and a half earlier, leading some to question whether Kikuki was exploiting the situation to drag her down or, unable to get what he wanted, sought to destroy her. Critics called his behavior childish and ungentlemanly, accusing him of using money to build the relationship and then demanding compensation after the breakup, branding him the worst ex in history. After the fallout on January 16, 2023, Himika issued a public apology and paused her nightclub work for nearly a month. She admitted to their past relationship, writing, "Himika shared that Kikuki's company suspected of fraud brought her immense pressure and criticism during their relationship, severely impacting the nightclub's reputation. She and her family also faced threats from Yakuza groups, forcing her to end the relationship. Soon after, she set her Instagram to private. Recently, Kikuki intensified his accusations, claiming Himika secretly mocked him to regain lost clients. He further alleged that during their relationship, Himika cheated with multiple men, including actor Yamamoto Yuzuka, known for Hanozakari no Kimitachi, and Yamato Ryusuke, a member of the idol group Hey Say Jump. Kikuki also claimed Himiko was jealous of his ex Ichigo Hibiki, constantly demanding more expensive gifts than those he'd given Aiko to prove his affection. Kikuki called the Nakamoto family opportunists, alleging Himika's father squandered her earnings on lavish escapades. Her mother encouraged her to buy luxury items as gifts, and her brother was a school bully who posted videos of his actions online, sparking public outrage. Kikuki claimed he paid to resolve that issue. The ongoing saga between Himika and Kikuki continues to captivate and divide the public with new revelations, fueling the controversy. While some netizens sympathize with Kikuki, most focus on a pressing question: where did his vast spending money come from? As mentioned earlier, Kikuka faces multiple lawsuits and admitted to sacrificing his social reputation for Himika. So, what's the real story? In 2022, a key figure accused ex-CA Kikuka's company of operating a Ponzi scheme with no actual investment activities. The accuser was Ito Daisuke, former vice president of SIA Japan, SIA's predecessor, co-founded by Kikuka and Ito in April 2015. A Ponzi scheme is a fraudulent investment model that pays returns to earlier investors using funds from newer ones, often promising high profits with low risk despite no real investment or business activity. Starting May 26, 2022, Ito Daisuke used social media to publicly expose SIA's issues. In the January 26, 2023 paid edition of Weekly Shinko's Money column, he further detailed Kikuka's shady dealings and SIA's inner workings. Local accounting records showed SIA had no income in 2017 and 2018 and failed to submit financial documents thereafter. Kikuka pretended the company used SIA loans to generate large forex trading profits, but no investments existed. Using new investors' money to fake dividends for earlier ones clearly marked it as a Ponzi scheme. Despite this, Kikuka spent extravagantly, splashing billions of yen at hostess clubs in Shinjuku Kabukicho and later in Osaka's Kitashinai. SIA once rented an entire floor in a Roppongi Tokyo high-rise for 50 million yen monthly, about $335,000. And spent 5 billion yen, roughly $33.5 million to lavishly decorate the office to attract investors. As the company's face, Kikuka was notorious for his lavish lifestyle, spending tens of millions of yen in a single night at clubs and buying a luxury condo for 300 million yen, around $2 million in cash. SIA raised 72.3 billion yen, approximately $485 million from about 12,000 investors. But by spring 2021, the company couldn't fulfill withdrawal requests, leading to numerous lawsuits for damages and share repurchasing. Following a wave of lawsuits in November 2022, SIA vacated its Roppongi office, relocating to a rundown building in Kiniko, Sumito Ward, Tokyo. That same month, SIA's cryptocurrency subsidiary ceased operations due to financial shortages. As ordered by Japan's financial services agency, Kikuka's platinum credit card was cancelled and some of his assets were frozen. Soon after, he resigned as SIA's chairman, with lawsuits against him ongoing regarding Kikuka's tax evasion allegations against Himika, renowned tax expert Sugawara Yuichi shared his analysis on his YouTube channel. Kikuka claimed Himika received gifts worth 2.5 billion yen, about $6.88 million US, including luxury bags, jewelry, and an unlimited credit card. If true, under Japan's 55% gift tax rate, plus penalties for non-declaration, Himika could owe up to 1.82 billion yen, roughly $12.2 million US. Even if Himika declared bankruptcy, she couldn't escape the gift tax obligation, risking asset seizure. If the marriage fraud accusation is proven and she's convicted alongside the massive tax bill, she could face up to 10 years in prison. With both figures entangled in legal battles, the case has been dubbed a showdown between two scammers. The public awaits whether Kikuka Sho, the investment genius, or Himika, the former top hostess, will face justice first. Story 2. In the frigid winter of 1958, America was shaken by a series of horrific crimes committed by two individuals too young to fully grasp the consequences of their actions. Charles Starkweather, age 19, and his 14-year-old girlfriend, Carol Ann Fugate, embarked on a ruthless journey of death, spreading terror across Nebraska and neighboring regions. In less than 2 months, 11 lives were taken, including Carol's family, friends, strangers, and even Good Samaritans simply because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Brutal, cold-blooded, and seemingly unmerciful. This pair became a blueprint for countless villains in popular culture, from films and music to novels. But what lay behind this string of serial killings? Blind love, insanity, or were they victims of a distorted adolescence marked by poverty and isolation? The story of Charles and Carol isn't just a tale of massacre. It's a psychological tragedy riddled with contradictions dividing American public opinion to this day. Was Carol a willing accomplice or a coerced child? And why has America remained obsessed with this couple for over half a century? Charles Starkweather was born on November 24, 1938, the third child of Guy and Helen Starkweather, who later had 6 more children. The family lived in Lincoln, Nebraska, the primary setting of the two. Understand what drove this couple to their merciless spree and how they became cultural icons. We must start at the root: Charles's childhood and adolescence, because initially he showed, I must emphasize, absolutely no signs of becoming a criminal. The Starkweather family wasn't well off. Charles's father, Guy, worked as a carpenter, but suffered from chronic hand pain. Back then, conditions like arthritis were difficult to treat, plunging the family into financial hardship. Though Guy desperately wanted to work, the pain limited his ability to do so consistently, causing their income to dwindle. To support the family and raise their children, Charles's mother, Helen, worked as a waitress at a small local cafe. But their life was far from the American dream. The Starkweathers lived in poverty, constantly worrying whether they'd have enough money for next week's meals. This level of struggle was relatively rare at the time, so it's worth noting that Charles wasn't a victim of domestic abuse. Guy and Helen were respected by neighbors and townsfolk as resilient people who did everything they could to support their family through honest labor. Guy felt immense guilt for his inability to work steadily. Instead of giving up, turning to alcohol, or taking out his frustrations on his children, as many did during that era, he stayed home to help his wife cooking, cleaning, and tending to the household. When his joint pain subsided, he'd return to his carpentry work. Charles required more attention than his siblings due to congenital disabilities. For starters, he was short, barely 5 feet 2 inches in, with a distinctive hunched posture that prevented him from standing straight. He also struggled with mobility due to bow legs, a condition where his knees bent inward. Beyond that, Charles suffered from severe stuttering and extreme nearsightedness. However, in that era, childhood vision problems weren't given proper attention. Today, if a child frequently complains of headaches at school or struggles to see the board, parents are advised to get their vision tested immediately. But for Charles, despite teachers noticing his difficulties with reading and learning, which relied heavily on textbooks back then, they simply labeled him as lazy and somewhat slow. Clearly, his studies were severely impacted because everything appeared blurry to him. It wasn't until his teenage years that he realized something was wrong, unable to see objects clearly beyond 12 in, while his friends could read signs at the end of the street. These differences made Charles odd in the eyes of his peers. Unsurprisingly, he became a target of bullying. Like many children, Charles couldn't understand why he was treated so cruelly and didn't know how to cope. A child raised in a loving family, always polite to others, couldn't fathom the rejection and harshness he faced. That pain Charles silently endured, and he never forgot it. As he entered his teenage years, Charles underwent a drastic transformation. Once a gentle, likable boy, he became withdrawn and cold. His peers no longer dared to tease him. They began to fear him. More significantly, Charles Starkweather was now ready to fight back with violence if anyone crossed him. Those around him at the time described him as a ticking time bomb, needing only a small spark to explode. During his coming-of-age years, like many American youths of the time, Charles discovered the film Rebel Without a Cause, a cinematic portrayal of a 17-year-old boy at odds with his family, searching for his place in society and clashing with the law. The movie quickly became a cultural icon for young people, inspiring every boy to emulate James Dean, the film's lead actor. This image deeply captivated Charles. He began mimicking James Dean's style, his clothing, gestures, and mannerisms, watching the film repeatedly to embody the character and learn how to react in various situations like the on-screen rebel. Surprisingly, this transformation worked. With his new look, no one dared to mock Charles anymore. From a lonely, friendless boy, he became a cool, mysterious young man who knew how to dress. And most importantly, no one dared to mess with him. Vanessa and Jessica, two names chosen entirely at random, started noticing Charles. This brought him a bit of joy, but to maintain his guard, he cultivated an air of mystery, often casting challenging glances at others in the school hallways. Those looks he delivered with undeniable coolness. A small detail worth noting, the film La Ferdivra, which inspired Charles, is actually a relatively loose adaptation of Robert Linder's book Rebel Without a Cause, a story about a person with psychological issues. Thanks to his new persona, Charles gradually made friends at school. Bob Von Bush, his best friend, later recalled, "He could be the best guy you'd ever meet. He'd do anything for you if he liked you. He was also really funny, but everything seemed like a joke to him, and he had another side. He could be unbelievably cruel. If he saw a guy who was taller, better looking, or dressed nicer than him on the street, he'd find a way to bring them down and humiliate them." As Charles grew older, his behavior increasingly alarmed those around him. His academic performance was dismal, and his propensity for violence grew. Whenever his parents reprimanded him, he reacted with anger. Unsure how to manage their son, they decided to find him a simple job, hoping he'd leave the education system and become independent. At 18, Charles found work at a warehouse where his daily task was stacking boxes. But the job didn't go well. Charles worked half-heartedly, and his boss called him the slowest employee in the warehouse. Despite lacking steady employment, Charles maintained a close friendship with Bob Von Bush, who had a girlfriend. Bob's girlfriend had a younger sister, and Bob wanted to introduce her to Charles, hoping he'd find a romantic connection. That sister was Carol and Fugate. In 1956, Charles met Carol, who would later become his accomplice in a cross-country crime spree that claimed over 10 lives. At the time, Carol was just 13, while Charles was 18. The age gap was undeniably concerning. No debate needed, and her minor status would later be considered during the trial. Their romance blossomed quickly, and Charles took a job near Carol's school, allowing them to meet almost daily. They'd stroll through the woods, drink, have lunch. And Charles even taught Carol to drive. He borrowed his father's 1949 Ford and let Carol take the wheel. Being her first time driving, she inevitably lost control, crashing into another car. Naturally, Guy, Charles's father, had to cover the repair costs. Charles had no money and the car was damaged. After this incident, Guy, though heartbroken, decided to kick his son out of the house. Charles's escalating violence, his relationship with a young girl, and his unauthorized use of the family car had pushed them beyond their limits. Around the same time, Charles was fired from his second job. He then landed a gig as a garbage collector, a role that began to reshape his worldview. There was no guiding light amidst the trash, but passing by lavish mansions, affluent neighborhoods, and shiny cars only fueled the rebellious fire within him. The job made him feel small, insignificant, as if his life was worth nothing, and his work was menial. Later, he bitterly remarked, "Who cares about a garbage man?" During his roots, Charles's mind began crafting dark scenarios. The wealthy homes he visited to collect trash stoked his desire to break in, even to kill the owners. Deep down, he harbored an intense hatred for successful, wealthy people who could afford beautiful homes. In Charles's twisted logic, eliminating them would bring everyone back to the same starting line because in death, everyone is equal. It was a warped philosophy, but one Charles was determined to. On November 30, 1957, Charles, now 19 years old, walked into a gas station, intending to buy a small stuffed toy he'd had his eye on as a gift for Carol. But he didn't have enough money. He promised the station manager, 21-year-old Robert Culbert, that he'd return later to pay. Robert, unsurprisingly, refused. There was no familiarity between them, despite Charles's insistence that he lived nearby and would keep his word. Taking goods without payment from a stranger was simply unacceptable. Charles was kicked out of the store. Rage and humiliation boiled within him, and he gritted his teeth, vowing to return and settle the score. "Fine, I'll come back and pay for that damn toy," he muttered under his breath. The next day, Charles returned to the gas station, pretending to buy a pack of cigarettes and some gum, to see if Robert was still at the counter. He was determined not to let this go. Charles left the store, covered his face with a scarf, put on a hat, loaded his shotgun, and returned. The robbery began, and in less than 2 hours, Charles Starkweather was about to commit his first murder, marking the moment he'd experienced a twisted sense of pleasure. Inside the gas station, Robert didn't resist or try to play the hero. He had a wife and a months-old daughter. His life wasn't worth risking over the $100 in the cash drawer. But Charles didn't stop. The ease of the situation unnerved him. He had expected Robert to beg or cry, but instead he was met with silence, another perceived insult. Charles forced Robert out of the station, took his car keys, and made him sit in the passenger seat. Charles drove toward rural Nebraska. This was one of the rare times he ventured beyond Lincoln, where he'd lived his entire life. But he wanted to take Robert to a remote area to mentally torture him for as long as possible. Robert gradually realized that if he didn't act, he'd be tormented to death like an animal. When Charles stopped the car in the desolate wilderness and ordered Robert to get out, the gas station manager feigned compliance, then suddenly lunged at Charles as he turned away. It was his only chance to survive. In the middle of nowhere, facing an armed opponent, he had to take the risk or face certain death. Both men were of similar build and age, making the struggle fierce. Neither gained a clear upper hand, but in the end, Robert Culbert, 21, was shot. He collapsed, blood pouring out. In his final moments, he knew he'd never see his daughter grow up. Charles had just taken a life for the first time, and he felt a strange exhilaration. All the resentment and inferiority he'd harbored for so long. The feeling of being a worthless failure suddenly vanished. He felt powerful, as if he'd finally gained control. He had $100 in his pocket, a girlfriend, and had just killed a man without anyone knowing. But in reality, Charles was sinking into a dangerous delusion, a state of sick euphoria, after murdering an innocent man in the middle of nowhere. That thrill, however, faded as quickly as a soap bubble, especially when he was fired from his job for chronic tardiness, unauthorized absences, and a complete lack of motivation. Charles was broke again. Rent and utility bills piled up, and his landlady even cut off the heat in the dead of winter. January and February, bone-chilling months in Nebraska. Charles had nothing left. The rush from his first murder had vanished. For weeks, he couldn't see Carol. Her parents had forbidden them from seeing each other. Carol had also gained weight recently, leading her family to suspect she might be pregnant. But Charles didn't give up. To him, Carol was everything. He barely spoke to his own parents, had no job, no money, and was spiraling deeper into his own darkness. On January 21, nearly 2 months after his first murder, a crime still shrouded in secrecy, Charles went to Carol's home. He knocked on the door and faced her parents, V.A. and Marion Bartlett, who immediately demanded he leave and stay away from their daughter, threatening to call the police and report him as a predator if he approached her again. But the events that unfolded in Carol Faggott's house on January 21, 1958, would forever seal the couple's fate. Charles returned a few hours later, this time with a gun. Back then, locking doors wasn't common practice. He walked in effortlessly, gun in hand, and shot the first person he saw, Carol's stepfather, Marion Bartlett, who fell dead on the spot. Appeared, barely registering what was happening, and was shot in the face. A cry echoed from upstairs. To this day, what happened next remains shrouded in mystery. Charles and Carol later blamed each other. But in one room, 2-year-old Betty, awakened by the gunshots and screaming, was brutally killed. Now, no one could keep Charles and Carol apart. Together, they disposed of the bodies behind the house in a twisted bonding ritual. Carol's stepfather was dumped on the floor of the chicken coop. Her mother was hidden in an outhouse, and her sister's body was stuffed into a barrel, also placed in the outhouse. Charles and Carol spent hours cleaning the interior of the house. Afterward, Carol hung a small sign on the door, announcing that the family had the flu, and requesting no visitors. That evening, the couple casually sat watching TV and eating potato chips, showing no intention of fleeing or seeking help. Carol appeared eerily relaxed despite her entire family having just been murdered, their bodies beginning to decompose and reek in the chicken coop and outhouse. The next day, when Carol's uncle came to check on the family after noticing the odd sign, Carol answered the door, insisting everyone was still sick and advising him not to come in. Investigations later revealed that several people visited the house over the following days, and each time, Carol was the one who appeared, lying to keep them from entering. This detail is crucial because by the end of the story, Carol would adopt a very particular defense strategy that you'll find noteworthy. Naturally, as time passed, no one believed that the family flu story anymore. Since January 21st, no one had seen Carol's stepfather or mother neighbors and finally reported the situation to the police. When investigators arrived on January 27, they found the house relatively clean. No obvious signs of foul play until they discovered Marion's body in the chicken coop, followed by Betty's bodies in the outhouse. By then, Charles and Carol had fled hours earlier, driving hundreds of miles away. Their crime spree had officially begun. On the road, Charles quickly realized two major issues. First, their car was in poor condition, which would be a disadvantage if pursued. Second, the car was registered in his name. If the police released the license plate, he'd be caught immediately. Carol then had an idea. A family friend, August Meyer, lived on a remote farm nearby. They could go to him, gain his trust, and steal his car. Charles found the plan feasible and they headed to August Meyer's farm to execute their dark scheme. Carol introduced Charles to August Meyer, who warmly invited them in for coffee and conversation. He remarked how much Carol had grown since he last saw her and noted he hadn't heard from her parents in a while. He kindly asked about her family, her sister, and then August Meyer suddenly collapsed, taking his last breath. Charles and Carol grabbed a few bills, then shot the dog in the yard. A completely senseless act as the innocent animal posed no threat but still took a bullet to the head. With that, they drove off in August Meyer's car. However, these masterminds didn't take the highway, opting instead for dirt roads. To avoid detection by any patrols that might have been alerted to the family massacre. As a result, they meandered through back roads, and the car eventually got stuck. Their total escape time was less than 48 hours, a pitiful record for fugitives. Charles remained calm, keeping his gun close. They decided to hitchhike. A young couple, 17-year-old Robert Jensen and 16-year-old Carol King, stopped to help. That fateful decision became a death sentence for both. They assumed Charles and Carol were around their age, seemed friendly, and just needed a ride. After a few minutes of cheerful small talk about the weather and trivial matters, Charles suddenly pulled his gun, forcing Robert to drive into a secluded forest. In that situation, with a gun to the back of your head, compliance is the Only option. Robert and Carol were ordered out of the car, both utterly terrified. They couldn't comprehend what they'd done wrong. They were just helping someone, and now they were being threatened at gunpoint. Charles coldly shot Robert. He then approached Carol with intent to assault her, but hesitated. Robert's lifeless body lay nearby. Carol screamed in horror, and Carol's pleading eyes met his. All of this stopped Charles from following through with the assault. In the end, Carol was also killed. By this point, Charles and Carol had murdered 6 people, including Carol's family, and their spree wasn't over. Robert and Carol's bodies were left behind near August Mears' stuck car. The couple continued their escape in their new vehicle, Robert's car, but fleeing, killing, and disposing of bodies left them famished. The fear of being recognized if they stopped at roadside diners was too great. By now, their descriptions had likely been broadcast on the radio. So, where would they find food? They decided to break into a house, hold the occupants at gunpoint, and force them to prepare a meal. With nowhere left to hide, and only familiar with their old haunts, Charles and Carol returned near Lincoln, Nebraska. They targeted a wealthy neighborhood, the class Charles had always despised since his days as a garbage collector. He'd long dreamed of entering a luxurious mansion and slaughtering everyone inside. Now he was about to turn that dark fantasy into reality. Their next victims were the Ward family living on 24th Street. Low Ward was a successful businessman well known in the area for his kindness and exceptional treatment of employees, a rare model of a boss. When Charles and Carol broke into the house, Lauer was out. They held the maid at gunpoint, ordering her to cook for them. Earlier they had shot Clara Ward, Lauer's wife, because she screamed too loudly upon seeing 2 armed strangers burst into her home. The maid, Ludmott, cooked for the killers while sobbing and begging for her life. She explained she was just a hired worker, uninvolved in the situation. Living a lonely life, 50 years old, never married, childless, and with few friends. Knowing the homeowners were wealthy, she offered to show them where the money was hidden if they spared her. At that moment, Lauer returned home, dressed sharply after a morning of work. He closed the door and called for his wife. But before he could hear a response, Charles, waiting at the top of the stairs, took aim from a perfect angle and shot him in the head. The man collapsed, and Charles nonchalantly returned to the kitchen to finish his meal. After eating, the maid was tied to a bed, beaten, and ultimately killed in a brutal manner. Charles and Carol quickly ransacked the house, taking some cash and jewelry before fleeing in Lauer's car, heading toward Wyoming. The Ward family massacre left behind a 14-year-old son at boarding school, absent during the tragedy. After the horrific discovery of the Wards and the maid's bodies, one of the largest manhunts of the 20th century was launched by U.S. authorities. News of the crime spree spread rapidly beyond the county. Nebraska authorities ordered the Lincoln sheriff to conduct door-to-door searches, inspecting every home, warehouse, and abandoned structure in the area to track down the couple believed to be driving Lower Ward's car. Details of the vehicle were broadcast widely on radio channels, forcing Charles and Carol to realize they needed to ditch the car as soon as possible. They made their way to Douglas, Wyoming. About an 8-hour drive from Lincoln, where law enforcement was already mobilizing a massive search effort. At a small, secluded roadside parking lot, they spotted a man sleeping soundly in his car. This time, Charles didn't hesitate for a second. In a state of extreme paranoia, terrified of being caught at any moment, he approached with his gun drawn. The unfortunate man was shot instantly. Charles and Carol hurriedly jumped into the stolen vehicle. A problem arose. The automotive industry in the late 1950s was undergoing rapid changes. And Charles, coming from a poor background, was clueless about modern car features. He only knew the basics. Insert the key. Press the clutch, hit the gas, and drive. But the car they had just stolen had its handbrake engaged. It sounds unbelievable, but Charles had no idea what a handbrake was. He turned the key, the engine roared, but the car wouldn't budge. Chaos erupted inside the vehicle. A passerby, hearing the unusual engine noise, approached to ask if Charles needed help. But by then, Charles had slipped into extreme paranoia. Suspecting a trap or fearing the delay would jeopardize their escape, he pulled out a knife, threatening the man to leave immediately. Unfortunately, the man didn't back off, and at that moment, a nearby patrolling officer witnessed the scene and decided to intervene to de-escalate the situation. Realizing Charles was moments away from being arrested or might even attack the officer, Carol made a shocking move. In a split second, she betrayed him. She flung open the car door, ran out, and broke down in tears, screaming that Charles was a murderer, extremely dangerous, and that she never wanted any part of this. The entire scene unfolded in just 10 seconds. Charles instantly realized he'd been betrayed. If he wanted to survive, he had to flee before the officer could react. Charles scrambled back to the old car, the one he'd stolen from the Ward residence, and this time he figured out how to start it, shift gears, press the gas, and speed off. Every police unit in Douglas was immediately alerted. Charles Starkweather was in the area and had just escaped. A high-speed chase ensued, stretching across miles of road. Police fired continuously, knowing Charles was armed and highly dangerous. One bullet pierced the windshield, grazed Charles's ear, and lodged into the front windshield. Blood streamed down his face, staining his hands, hair, and nearly getting into his eyes. Charles panicked, believing he was about to die. He pulled over, stepped out with his hands raised, begging the police to take him to a hospital. It was a far from glorious end. After a medical check, his injury turned out to be minor, just a shallow cut from the grazing bullet with significant bleeding, but no threat to his life. Charles Starkweather and Carol Fugate were arrested and extradited back to Nebraska, where most of their crimes took place. When asked about agreeing to the extradition, Charles consented immediately, naively believing that being tried in his home state would spare him the death penalty, as the governor at the time was known for opposing capital punishment. But Charles miscalculated. Politics is an unpredictable game. The governor might oppose the death penalty, but if executing a nationally despised criminal could boost his votes in the upcoming election, there was no reason for him to refuse. Charles had misjudged a critical move in this high-stakes game. Charles and Carol were interrogated separately for an extended period, allowing investigators to reconstruct the full timeline of events. Each chose a distinct defense strategy. Charles claimed he had coerced Carol into joining his crime spree, but over time she developed a thrill for stealing and taking lives, eventually becoming a willing accomplice. He insisted she could have left at any time and even had access to weapons. If she truly felt threatened, shooting him would have been easy. According to Charles, Carol killed Carol King out of jealousy. Conversely, Carol adamantly claimed she was kidnapped by Charles right after he massacred her family. She stated she wasn't present during the murders, and when she returned home, Charles told her that her family had been abducted and he needed to flee. However, this account starkly contradicted the statements of witnesses who interacted with Carol, confirming she answered the door and told them her family was sick when in reality they had already been murdered. Carol claimed she was too terrified to escape, fearing Charles would find her and kill her before he was caught. Her defense attorney portrayed her as a 14-year-old girl, manipulated and living in constant terror, merely trying to survive alongside a mentally disturbed boyfriend. But the public, jury, and judge didn't buy this defense. To them, Charles and Carol were a notorious criminal duo, reeling in a depraved spree of murders across the state. Both were tried on similar charges. On May 23, 1958, at the age of 20, Charles Starkweather was sentenced to death. He didn't appeal and was executed just over a year later. At midnight on June 25, 1959, on the electric chair, Charles remained silent until the end, but left a letter for his father writing, "Dad, I don't really regret what I did. For the first time, Carol and I felt truly happy." Witnesses described Charles as utterly detached, accepting his fate with indifference. While many death row inmates scream or beg for forgiveness, Charles sat silently, awaiting the fatal surge of electricity. As for Carol, she also faced the possibility of a death sentence. But her young age and gender, a significant factor in the 1960s, resulted in a life sentence instead. She served 27 years in a women's prison before being released for good behavior in June 1976 at age 33. Afterward, she moved to a small town in Michigan, working at a hospital and caring for children to make a living. Recent reports indicate she married in 2007 to Frederick Clerk, a meteorologist, until August 2013, when they were involved in a serious car accident. Frederick died, but Carol survived. Decades later, the saga of Charles Starkweather and Carol Fugate continues to haunt and captivate the public. They've inspired numerous films like Natural Born Killers, Badlands in California, as well as characters in Stephen King's stories. Nearly 70 years after the tragedy, many still recall the deadly journey that claimed 10 lives, not counting Robert Calvert, the first victim Charles killed when he was still acting alone. Story 3. On a winter afternoon in the Netherlands, an old car quietly glided down a deserted rural road. Inside were 4 young friends who had just wrapped up a lively weekend gathering. None of them could have imagined that this peaceful moment was as fragile as the winter sunlight, arriving and vanishing in an instant. Just a few days later, a crime shattered the tranquility of the small town. The crime scene was none other than the forest where they had recently strolled together. All 4 friends were promptly listed as suspects by the police. The case was like a massive stone thrown into a still lake, sending ripples crashing outward, ultimately becoming one of the most captivating cases in Dutch legal history. Were these four truly involved in the crime? Now, let's uncover the story of this chilling case. Back at the crime scene, the police investigation was still underway. The modest wooden house sat quietly in the dense forest on the eastern outskirts of Putin, next to a narrow, winding, deserted road. The single-story structure had no surrounding fence, blending seamlessly with the natural surroundings. It had two entrances. The front door faced the road, connected to a gravel path leading to the main street. The back door was at the rear, accessible only by circling past a makeshift garage nearby. What caught the police's attention was that the front door was locked from the inside, ruling out the possibility that the perpetrator exited that way. Meanwhile, the back door was locked from the outside with the key still in its usual spot in the garage where the family typically kept it. Based on initial observations, the police theorized that after committing the crime, the perpetrator left through the back door, locked it from the outside, and returned the key to its place in the garage. This sequence of actions seemed peculiar at first, but suggested a significant possibility. The perpetrator might have known Crystal or her grandmother, perhaps even being familiar with their routines. Of course, another theory was considered. The killer could have stopped Crystal beforehand, followed her to the house, observed her using the garage key to enter through the back door, and after the murder, deliberately returned the key to its spot to mislead investigators into thinking the culprit was an acquaintance. At the time of the crime, DNA analysis was beginning to be used in criminal investigations in the Netherlands. However, as the technology was still in its early stages, the country had not yet established a comprehensive DNA database. In an effort to uncover more clues, the police expanded their search of the house. During this process, they found a baby tooth, later identified as belonging to Bas Ambrosius, Crystal's older brother. Even more shocking, forensic experts discovered skin cells on the jeans Crystal wore that day, which belonged to Bas. Suddenly, her brother, already reeling from the loss of his sister, became a suspect, facing immense emotional pressure. Fortunately, after thorough verification, the police cleared Bas of suspicion. The baby tooth turned out to be one he'd lost as a child, which had fallen into a crevice in the house years ago and gone unnoticed. The DNA on Crystal's jeans was likely from everyday interactions. Perhaps Bas had sat on the sofa, leaving skin cells behind, and Crystal later sat in the same spot, transferring the cells onto her clothing. With Bas no longer a suspect, the police began a broader investigation into residents living in the area. A witness reported seeing Crystal riding her bike alone near the wooden house on the eastern outskirts around 4 p.m. on the day of the murder, the last time she was seen alive. Since the crime scene was in a remote suburban area with little foot traffic, no one saw Crystal with anyone else at the time. Just as the investigation hit a dead end, a group of hikers proactively contacted the police, providing a crucial lead. They recounted that in recent weekends, they had frequently noticed a group of 4 men driving an old Mercedes-Benz through the forest on the eastern side of town. The men were often laughing and chatting loudly, standing out against the serene backdrop. Through verification, the police identified the 4 men as local Putin residents. Wilco Wyatts, Herman Dubbus, William Bedink, and Garrett Chu Hart. They were longtime friends with shared interests, often gathering for fun. Among them, Herman was Wilco's brother-in-law, their bond as close as family. The hiker's account was quickly corroborated by other witnesses. Notably, some even reported seeing the four suspicious men near the crime scene around the time Crystal was killed, making them prime suspects in the eyes of the police. However, when summoned for questioning, all four vehemently denied any involvement, insisting on their innocence. The police collected their DNA samples to compare with those found at the scene, but the results were disappointing. None matched. Despite the DNA mismatch, investigators proposed a controversial theory. Crystal might have been intimate with someone else before her death, while the actual killer left no biological traces during the murder. Though it sounded far-fetched and lacked solid evidence, this theory gained traction at the time due to the absence of more concrete leads. Convinced the four men were directly involved, the police employed intense, relentless interrogation tactics, hoping to find cracks in their statements. Under prolonged pressure, two of the group, Wilm and Garrett, finally gave in and confessed. They claimed they didn't participate in the murder, but pointed the finger at the other two, Wilco and Herman, as the true culprits. Back at the crime scene, the police investigation was still underway. The modest wooden house sat quietly in the dense forest on the eastern outskirts of Putin, next to a narrow, winding, deserted road. The single-story structure had no surrounding fence, blending seamlessly with the natural surroundings. It had two entrances. The front door faced the road, connected to a gravel path leading to the main street. The back door was at the rear, accessible only by circling past a makeshift garage nearby. What caught the police's attention was that the front door was locked from the inside, ruling out the possibility that the perpetrator exited that way. Meanwhile, the back door was locked from the outside with the key still in its usual spot in the garage where the family typically kept it. Based on initial observations, the police theorized that after committing the crime, the perpetrator left through the back door, locked it from the outside, and returned the key to its place in the garage. This sequence of actions seemed peculiar at first, but suggested a significant possibility. The perpetrator might have known Crystal or her grandmother, perhaps even being familiar with their routines. Of course, another theory was considered. The killer could have stalked Crystal beforehand, followed her to the house, observed her using the garage key to enter through the back door, and after the murder, deliberately returned the key to its spot to mislead investigators into thinking the culprit was an acquaintance. At the time of the crime, DNA analysis was beginning to be used in criminal investigations in the Netherlands. However, as the technology was still in its early stages, the country had not yet established a comprehensive DNA database. In an effort to uncover more clues, the police expanded their search of the house. During this process, they found a baby tooth, later identified as belonging to Bas Ambroius, Crystal's older brother. Even more shocking, forensic experts discovered skin cells on the jeans Crystal wore that day, which belonged to Bas. Suddenly, her brother, already reeling from the loss of his sister, became a suspect, facing immense emotional pressure. Fortunately, after thorough verification, the police cleared Bas of suspicion. The baby tooth turned out to be one he'd lost as a child, which had fallen into a crevice in the house years ago and gone unnoticed. The DNA on Crystal's jeans was likely from everyday interactions. Perhaps BAS had sat on the sofa, leaving skin cells behind, and Crystal later sat in the same spot, transferring the cells onto her clothing. With Bass no longer a suspect, the police began a broader investigation into residents living in the area. A witness reported seeing Crystal riding her bike alone near the wooden house on the eastern outskirts around 4 p.m. on the day of the murder, the last time she was seen alive. Since the crime scene was in a remote suburban area with little foot traffic, no one saw Crystal with anyone else at the time. Just as the investigation hit a dead end, a group of hikers proactively contacted the police, providing a crucial lead. They recounted that in recent weekends, they had frequently noticed a group of 4 men driving an old Mercedes-Benz through the forest on the eastern side of town. The men were often laughing and chatting loudly, standing out against the serene backdrop. Through verification, the police identified the 4 men as local Putin residents: Wilco Wyatts, Herman Dubas, William Bedin, and Garrett Schuhart. They were longtime friends with shared interests, often gathering for fun. Among them, Herman was Wilco's brother-in-law, their bond as close as family. The hiker's account was quickly corroborated by other witnesses. Notably, some even reported seeing the 4 suspicious men near the crime scene around the time Crystal was killed, making them prime suspects in the eyes of the police. However, when summoned for questioning, all 4 vehemently denied any involvement, insisting on their innocence. The police collected their DNA samples to compare with those found at the scene, but the results were disappointing. None matched. Despite the DNA mismatch, investigators proposed a controversial theory. Crystal might have been intimate with someone else before her death. While the actual killer left no biological traces during the murder, though it sounded far-fetched and lacked solid evidence, this theory gained traction at the time due to the absence of more concrete leads. Convinced the 4 men were directly involved, the police employed intense, relentless interrogation tactics, hoping to find cracks in their statements. Under prolonged pressure, 2 of the group, Wilm and Garrett, finally gave in and confessed. They claimed they didn't participate in the murder, but pointed the finger at the other 2, Will and Garrett, as the true culprits. According to Will and Garrett, on the afternoon of the murder, the 4 were driving around the outskirts of Put 10 as usual. As their car passed the wooden house where the crime occurred, they spotted Crystal cycling alone. At that moment, Will and Garrett suddenly asked the others to leave first, then got out of the car and secretly followed Crystal toward the house nearby. Not long after, Will and Garrett returned to the house by car. Through the window, they saw Crystal being attacked. Though they claimed to have witnessed the entire incident, they chose to stay silent. When Wilco and Herman left the scene, the group acted as if nothing had happened and drove away together. The police confronted Wilco and Herman with Will and Garrett's statements. Learning they had been accused by their friends, the 2 were furious, steadfastly denying any involvement in the crime. However, the police didn't believe in their innocence and intensified their interrogations, prolonging sessions and applying greater pressure. Eventually, the psychological strain became too much, and Wilco and Herman admitted to being involved in Crystal's death. A year after the murder, the case went to trial at the Arnhem Court of Appeals. The prosecution relied on two main pieces of evidence, the statements of the two friends and the confessions of the defendants. Despite the lack of concrete physical evidence, the Arnhem Court convicted Wilco and Herman of murder, sentencing each to 10 years in prison. When the verdict was announced, Anna Wilco's sister and Herman's wife could hardly believe it. She and Herman had lived harmoniously, raising two children in a loving home. But the moment her husband was convicted, her life crumbled. She knew her brother and husband well. Gentle, calm men who couldn't possibly have brutally killed an innocent woman. Public opinion at the time was rife with skepticism. Many found the police's explanation for the DNA mismatch, suggesting Crystal may have been intimate with someone else, unconvincing and baseless, far from sufficient to justify a conviction. Amid these dissenting voices, two prominent figures played a pivotal role. The first was Peter R. Dice, a renowned crime journalist and host of a popular Dutch talk show focused on high-profile criminal cases. His program had shattered viewership records and wielded significant societal influence. The second was Jean Blauw, a retired police chief from Rotterdam and the first Dutch officer trained by the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation (FBI). Though retired, he maintained a deep interest in unsolved cases. Notably, Crystal's murder wasn't part of his prior caseload, but he followed the case out of personal interest. Both Peter and Jean believed Wilco and Herman were innocent, prompting them to collaborate and push for a retrial. Peter produced several special episodes of his show, working with legal experts and inviting Jean as a guest to analyze the case from a professional perspective, highlighting its inconsistencies. Leveraging the show's influence, they successfully reignited public interest, sparking a new wave of societal debate. Jean even wrote to the Ministry of Justice criticizing the police investigation and published an in-depth book on the case. In his book, Jean argued that the police had fallen into tunnel vision, a state where investigators focus only on evidence fitting their initial hypothesis, dismissing or downplaying other possibilities. In Crystal's case, Jean believed the police had identified suspects too early, leading to bias and a loss of necessary objectivity. Through their relentless efforts, the case's discrepancies gained widespread public attention and discussion. Increasingly, people believed Wilco and Herman were victims of a serious miscarriage of justice. In 2001, 7 years after the murder, the defense team filed a petition with the Supreme Court for a retrial. This time, a breakthrough came. The Supreme Court found flaws in the Arnhem Court's prior ruling, overturned the verdict, and ordered a new trial. By 2002, Wilco and Herman had served 7 years. Due to good behavior and having completed over 2/3 of their sentence, they were granted parole. Returning to the outside world, both carried the hope that the upcoming trial would clear their names. In April 2002, the case was retried at the Arnhem Court of Appeals. Based on the DNA evidence that didn't match the defendants, the court declared Wilco and Herman not guilty, releasing them immediately. Having been wrongfully imprisoned for 7 years, each was awarded compensation of $900,000. Approximately $950,000 at the 2002 exchange rate. During that Fateful trial. Wilco and Herman sat in tense anticipation as they awaited the verdict. When the judge pronounced the words "not guilty," they exchanged a look, their eyes brimming with indescribable emotion. For Anna, Herman's wife, those 7 years had been a tormenting journey. While her husband was incarcerated, she and their children faced constant scrutiny and scorn from others. The family endured harassing phone calls. Yet Anya dared not ignore them, fearing she might miss crucial updates about her husband. Despite the harsh circumstances, Anna never abandoned hope of proving her husband's innocence. She unwaveringly believed in Herman's kindness and integrity. Now justice had finally prevailed, and the small family, having endured immense hardship, could hold hands and step out of the darkness, reclaiming a happiness they thought was lost forever. However, the case was far from closed. If Wilco and Herman were innocent, then who was the real killer? In 2006, 12 years after the murder, the Dutch Public Prosecution Service decided to reinvestigate the case. By then, DNA technology had advanced significantly, and the national DNA database had been expanded and refined. A key development came from a 2004 law requiring individuals with criminal records to submit DNA samples for storage, a change that led to a stunning breakthrough in the Putin case. In 2008, the Netherlands Forensic Institute sent an urgent report to the judiciary. A DNA sample perfectly matched the evidence collected from Christel's crime scene. The match belonged to Ronald Piper, who was 19 at the time of the murder and currently resided in Delft. Piper had been convicted in 2005 for assaulting his girlfriend, and that case had led to his DNA being stored, ultimately exposing the truth. The analysis confirmed that Ronald's DNA matched the samples found on Christel's body, making him the primary suspect. Investigations revealed that Ronald was born and raised in Putin, living just a few hundred meters from the crime scene. At the time of the murder, the police had conducted door-to-door inquiries and collected DNA samples from local residents, including Ronald, but he had adamantly refused to provide a sample, claiming he was always at home and uninvolved. Since the police were already focused on Wilco and Herman, Ronald easily slipped through the cracks. Further investigation uncovered Ronald's troubled past. He was known for starting fights, displaying violence, and engaging in disruptive behavior. A challenge in the initial investigation was the missing underwear and boots of the victim, which compromised the completeness and objectivity of the evidence. The defense argued that the DNA could have been left during a consensual encounter, and the possibility of a third party committing the crime couldn't be ruled out. However, the prosecution strongly refuted this, pointing out that despite the missing items, the latest tests confirmed Ronald's DNA at critical locations. Traces on the victim's thigh, skin cells under her fingernails, and the inner lining of her jeans. Notably, the skin under her nails indicated Christel had fought back, scratching her attacker in self-defense. After 4 months of trial, the court convicted Ronald Piper of murder, sentencing him to 15 years in prison. The defense, deeming the harsh, rejected the verdict and immediately appealed. However, the appeals court not only upheld the conviction, but increased the sentence to 18 years. Ultimately, the Supreme Court of the Netherlands issued a final ruling. Ronald would serve 15 years and 6 months. As for the motive, some Experts speculated that Ronald Piper might suffer from borderline personality disorder, a condition that can trigger impulsive and dangerous behavior. Assessments of Ronald's character were deeply divided. Some viewed him as kind and well-regarded, while others described him as cold, detached, and prone to violence. Ronald exhibited unsettling behaviors such as collecting photos of women and annotating them with personal details. His family relationships were also strained. He repeatedly claimed to have been abused by his father, harboring deep resentment toward him. Ronald's parents were ashamed of their son's crimes. After his conviction and imprisonment, his father visited only once, while his mother, furious, declared that if she saw Ronald again, she'd attack him herself. Just as the public believed the case was finally closed, a shocking revelation emerged from within the prison. Ronald confessed to a fellow inmate that besides Crystal, he had killed another person. The inmate immediately reported this confession. The case unfolded in 2005 in the town of Rijswijk, southwestern Netherlands, not far from Delft, where Ronald was living at the time. The victim was a 22-year-old student named Anoukeke van der Stoep who lived with her foster father. Anoukeke had a close friend in Enschede, a city in eastern Netherlands. On a summer evening, Anoukeke prepared to visit her friend. She packed her handbag, phone, and laptop, leaving home to catch a train at The Hague Central Station, planning to return later that night. But by the early hours of the next morning, her foster father grew concerned when she didn't return. He tried calling her phone, but the call wouldn't connect due to a depleted account balance. He then contacted Anoukeke's friend to ask if she had stayed overnight, only to learn that the friend had seen her onto the train back home. Around 9:30 p.m. that night, Anoukeke was dropped off at the station, and her friend watched her board the train. Based on the train schedule, Anoukeke should have arrived back at the Hague Central Station around midnight, then taken the last tram home. Yet, she never appeared. Her foster father's worry deepened. Early the next morning, he reported her disappearance to the local police. Upon receiving the report, the police immediately traced Anoukeke's phone signal. The last signal was recorded at 2:15 a.m. in the Lind Edwin area, a residential neighborhood in The Hague. That night, Anoukeke's phone had twice dialed an unknown number, but both calls failed to connect. From these clues, the police suspected the young woman may have met with foul play. Anoukeke's body was later found in a forest in Eilenberg within Rijswijk. It was concealed by dense shrubbery near an overpass over 5 meters from the nearest footpath, a spot nearly impossible to spot from outside. Since the discovery occurred in summer, the body had partially decomposed, making it extremely difficult to determine the time and cause of death. However, some signs at the scene suggested she may have been assaulted before her death. Anoukeke's personal belongings, her handbag, laptop, and phone were missing. The police launched a public appeal for information, particularly targeting those who had been on the train from Enschede to The Hague that night. Despite their efforts, the case saw little progress for a long time. In desperation, Anoukeke's foster father sought help from a crime journalist. None other than Peter, who had played a key role in pushing for the reinvestigation of the Putin case. Peter brought Anoukeke's disappearance to national television, urging the public to help find leads. A few witnesses reported seeing a white van near the area, but beyond this, no significant clues emerged. Interestingly, during the investigation, a group of psychics claimed to have obtained case-related insights through spiritual communication. They provided the police with a report detailing the victim's movements and suspect information, though the specific findings were not widely disclosed. That same year, when Ronald Piper was convicted for Crystal's murder, his case received widespread media coverage. Anukaka's foster father began to suspect Ronald might be linked to his daughter's case and hoped the authorities would investigate him further. Unexpectedly, shortly after, Ronald voluntarily revealed in prison that he was involved in Anukaka's case, a revelation that marked a major breakthrough in the investigation. The police investigated Ronald's whereabouts at the time of the crime. He lived in Delft, a city adjacent to Rice-Waikiki, where Anukaka's body was found. At the time, Ronald worked as a truck driver for an auction company in The Hague. He owned a white van, but sold it shortly after the incident. According to acquaintances, Ronald frequently drove to Rice-Waikiki to fish, and one of his regular fishing spots was near the location where Anukaka's body was discovered. The police then reviewed security camera footage within the range of the cell tower Anukaka's phone last pinged, focusing on whether Ronald appeared near the scene. Footage from a gas station camera revealed that at around 2:30 a.m., just after Anukaka's phone signal was lost, Ronald drove his white van to the station. Furthermore, transaction records confirmed that Ronald used Anukaka's bank card to make a purchase there, buying a few sandwiches and an ice cream. This critical evidence directly tied Ronald to Anukaka's case. As the investigation continued, the police gathered more evidence solidifying the suspicions against Ronald. Knowing Anukaka had her laptop with her before disappearing, they examined Ronald's electronic devices. They discovered that the hard drive in his computer belonged to Anukaka. It contained numerous comic images she loved, a genre Ronald had never shown interest in. Additionally, Ronald's ex-girlfriend turned over a USB drive she found in his kitchen drawer. Forensic analysis revealed the USB contained Anukaka's photos and academic documents. In 2012, the case went to trial at The Hague District Court. Ronald was charged with murder. However, in a surprising turn, he denied all involvement in Anukaka's case. At the trial, Ronald claimed he had merely stolen Anukaka's belongings from somewhere else. He argued that the person in surveillance footage wasn't him, but another man with a similar appearance and clothing style. The police, however, found this defense unconvincing and urged the court to impose a life sentence. Despite this, the district court acquitted Ronald of murder, citing a lack of direct evidence proving his involvement in the killing. Unwilling to accept the ruling, the prosecution immediately appealed, again, pushing for a life sentence. After 2 years of appeals, the appellate court concluded there was no evidence of premeditated murder, thus insufficient grounds for a murder conviction. However, Ronald was found guilty of manslaughter and sentenced to 4 years and 6 months in prison. Following the verdict, public opinion was sharply divided. Some argued the sentence was too lenient, failing to serve as a deterrent or deliver justice for the victim. Others questioned whether Ronald might have been wrongfully convicted, doubting the validity of his confession in prison and suggesting it could be baseless fabrication. Some even wrote books challenging the court's ruling based on evidence analysis, reigniting Questions about the Putin case and whether Ronald was truly Crystal's killer. Crystal's family has never escaped the pain of losing her. And the relentless media scrutiny and public discourse were like stones thrown into a still lake, constantly stirring up the painful memories they tried to bury. In an interview, Crystal's mother shared her deep bitterness, condemning the media and public for their intense focus on the case, which infringed on her family's privacy and deepened their grief. She recounted how during Crystal's funeral, a journalist posing as a police officer attempted to secretly photograph her daughter's body, but was fortunately caught and stopped in time. What pained the mother most was a TV production team reenacting the crime scene right near her home. One day, returning from work, she passed a familiar street corner and suddenly saw a girl cycling by. From her silhouette to her hair fluttering in the wind, everything reminded her of Crystal, her daughter, who was gone forever. In that moment, instinctively, she called out, "Crystal." But a second later, reality pulled her back to the cold truth. Her daughter was no longer in this world and would never appear again. Yet, strangers continued to visit the neighborhood, probing about the case, reopening wounds that had yet to heal. For Crystal's family, a peaceful life had become an unattainable dream. Time passed quietly. By 2022, Ronald had served 2/3 of his sentence. Predictably, he applied for parole. However, the court rejected his request, stating he didn't meet the conditions for early release and that his crimes were too severe to be easily forgiven by the law. The news stories that once stirred public outrage and the scrutinizing gaze of society were like a tidal wave, fierce and overwhelming. Before being swept away by time, leaving behind a quiet aftermath, all that remained was a cold gravestone bearing Crystal's name, standing silently, guarding time and pain like a restless soul forever watching over her loved ones. Story 4. This is a case that shocked Australia. A chilling drama cloaked as a friendly gathering that left a lasting scar. A painful death drawn out over 36 hours ended the life of a young man amidst the chilling indifference of those around him. The tragedy turned even more brutal when the truth came to light. The mastermind behind it all was the very person the victim trusted most. In the end, the perpetrator was imprisoned for just 4 years only to walk free and even become a public figure. Has justice truly been served? Let's travel back to 1997, the year a horrifying tragedy unfolded, to find answers to lingering questions. Everyone knows the vibrant Sydney and the trendy Melbourne, but nestled in the heart of Australia lies another gem. Canberra, the capital of the land of kangaroos, isn't just the largest inland city. It's a green paradise with sprawling parks and gardens. Its clean, safe, and high-quality living environment has made CRA a dream destination for many. Yet in this peaceful city, an unexpected story unraveled. "Help me, my boyfriend. He's overdosed." Aina Singh's panicked voice echoed through the phone. At 12:10 p.m., Canberra's emergency centre received a desperate call. 8 minutes later, the shrill wail of an ambulance siren shattered the quiet street. At 79 Until Street, the scene that greeted the paramedics sent shivers down their spines. Jyotinai Anu's boyfriend lay motionless on the bed, his body pale and purple, foam spilling from his mouth. His lower half was exposed, his skin an unnatural reddish brown. His stomach was bloated and his breathing had completely stopped. 10 minutes passed, but all efforts by the medical team were futile. Finally, the doctor had to deliver the devastating news. Joe was gone. Anu stood frozen. She screamed, tore at her hair, unable to accept the harsh reality. No, it can't be. He has to come back. She wailed in despair. Her eyes red, her face strewn with tears. In her overwhelming grief, Anu clung to her lover's cold body, calling his name over and over. You can't leave me. Don't leave me alone. Her voice was hollow, the pain tearing at the heart. It took a while for those around her to gently pull her away, helping her regain some composure. At that moment, the sound of police sirens filled the air. The forensic report revealed Joe died from acute poisoning caused by a mix of illicit substances and sedatives. The free morphine level in his blood was 0.67 mg per liter, far exceeding the lethal threshold by several times. The combination of an excessive morphine dose with prior sedative use created a powerful synergistic effect, leading to respiratory failure and death. Injection marks on the victim's arm indicated Joe had been directly administered heroin. Notably, the simultaneous use of multiple substances, especially the combination of high-dose morphine and sedatives, was unusual for a typical heroin addict. This raised suspicions that Joe may have been deliberately poisoned. As the sole witness to the incident, Anu became the focus of the investigators. However, the immense shock of her loss left her completely broken. Her piercing cries and disjointed, stammering words made taking her statement incredibly difficult. With so few clues to go on, investigators were forced to dig into Anu and Joe's past. Through interviews with family, friends, and neighbors, a complex picture of the couple's relationship began to emerge. Born in India, but raised in Sydney, Anu Singh carried the duality of two cultures and heritages. The daughter of Indian doctors, Anu grew up in a wealthy, strict household. But behind her obedient facade lay a rebellious spirit. A sense of unease had haunted Anu since childhood. She craved freedom but felt trapped by her family's expectations. Though she always needed someone by her side, Anu struggled to connect with anyone. From the age of 13, she began living recklessly, dating numerous boys and indulging in excessive partying. Surprisingly, despite her reckless lifestyle, Anu remained an exceptional student. She could stay up all night to finish assignments, but also neglect her studies for weeks to go partying. Her natural talent and photographic memory allowed her to ace exams effortlessly whether she studied or not. Throughout high school with an impressive score of 94.1, Anu easily secured a scholarship to the Australian National University where she pursued dual degrees in economics and law. Her academic excellence brought pride to her family and showcased her remarkable abilities. Despite her teenage rebellion, Anu remained a source of pride for her parents. Stepping into university life, Anu left her family's embrace to start an independent life. However, the young woman struggled to adapt to living away from home. Her fear of loneliness and over-reliance on her family led her to frequently call home, even expressing distress when she had to return to CRA after holidays. An unexpected event disrupted Anu's life in her second year of university. After a minor accident at school, she fell into a state of emotional turmoil and decided to take a break from her studies. This hiatus left lasting psychological scars, making Anu more fragile and vulnerable than ever. Upon returning to school, Anu met Simon Walsh, a charismatic young man with striking looks and a humorous personality. Their love blossomed like a summer breeze, intense and unexpected. The two quickly became a couple and decided to live together. However, their relationship harbored dark corners. A past mistake haunted them. The painful decision to terminate a pregnancy, a choice that weighed heavily on them both. In 1994, Anu graduated with a bachelor's degree in economics, stepping into a new chapter of her life. But the joy was short-lived as her relationship with Simon grew increasingly strained. Her addiction to stimulants drastically altered her personality, making her erratic and quick-tempered. Ultimately, the couple decided to end their tumultuous relationship. One fateful night at a nightclub in Newcastle, Anu met Joe Chinky, a young man with a radiant smile and a warm heart. Unlike Simon, Joe brought Anu a sense of peace and protection, a talented athlete with a loving family and a vibrant life. Joe's presence was like a ray of sunshine, dispelling the darkness in Anu's soul. In November 1994, after completing his university program, Joe decided to take time to explore the world. His travels gave him unforgettable experiences and a fresh perspective on life. Returning to Newcastle, Joe quickly adapted to the city's lively pace and secured a stable job. His life at this point seemed picture perfect, earning admiration from family and friends. However, Anu's arrival painted a very different picture. From the moment they met, Joe was captivated by her mysterious beauty and allure. Despite knowing Anu had a boyfriend, Joe couldn't suppress his intense feelings for her. He pursued her relentlessly and eventually won her heart. Anu's behavioral changes didn't escape Simon's notice. Secret messages, late-night calls, and mysterious smiles fueled his suspicions. His investigation confirmed his worst fears. Anu had been unfaithful. A tense confrontation ended in a tearful breakup filled with bitter words. Though she was at fault, Anu became a victim of Simon's harsh words. His insult, calling her stupid, struck her like a dagger to her pride, plunging her into deep depression. Sleepless nights, tears streaming down her face, and a growing apathy toward everything around her revealed the immense emotional pain Anu was enduring. Despite her family's loving support, they couldn't fully grasp the depth of her silent suffering. Yet the distance couldn't hinder Joe's profound love for Anu. Though hundreds of kilometers apart, Joe in Newcastle and Anu in CRA, he always found ways to be by her side. Nightly phone calls, exhausting weekend trips, and unwavering care in every moment showcased Joe's sincere devotion. Joe was like a modern-day knight, ready to sacrifice everything for the woman he loved. He didn't hesitate to leave his stable job to be with Anu, helping her through her struggles. His actions worried his family and friends who feared he was giving up too much for this relationship. But love had blinded Joe. He saw only Anu, heedless of everything else. To stay by Anu's side, Joe left his stable job and moved to CRA. He became not just her partner but her rock during tough times. Joe's sacrifice earned admiration from many who saw them as a perfect couple. However, Anu's mental state continued to deteriorate. Her pre-existing psychological issues seemed to worsen. While living with Joe, by late 1996, Anu began experiencing strange symptoms. She constantly complained of vague aches and discomfort throughout her body. Delusional hallucinations became more vivid. She heard strange voices in her head and felt unreal sensations. Anu believed she was being attacked by invisible insects, convinced they were slowly taking over her body. Despite her frail and gaunt appearance, Anu remained obsessed with her looks. She convinced herself she was too fat and embarked on a harsh diet and intense workout regimen. Her fixation on her appearance grew worse, leading her to sacrifice her health to meet her weight loss goals. It didn't stop there. Anu also self-diagnosed herself with various terminal illnesses from chronic fatigue syndrome to HIV. She was convinced she was battling deadly diseases. Despite her family taking her for medical evaluations and treatment, Anu refused to believe the doctor's results. She felt abandoned and misunderstood. In her despair, Anu began preparing for her death, writing a suicide note, liquidating her assets, and bidding farewell to loved ones. In June 1997, a wave of despair engulfed Anu, driving her to seek escape as a way out. Together with a close friend, she planned to end her life, even researching methods to carry out the act. But fate played a cruel twist. The one who died wasn't Anu but Joe. Joe's diary revealed a man far different from what people assumed. He was optimistic, full of life, and had big plans for the future. Joe also had no history of drug use. In fact, he despised drugs. The presence of drugs in his system was highly unusual, strongly suggesting someone had forced them into him. As the only person present at the scene, Anu became the prime suspect for the police. However, the emergency team statement offered a different perspective. They confirmed that Anu had actively performed first aid on Joe, from CPR to chest compressions. This behavior starkly contrasted with the image of someone intent on harm. The case seemed to hit a dead end as leads dwindled. Then, a small detail in the paramedics' testimony became a turning point. They noted that Anu had hesitated before providing her exact address and name. This deepened suspicions about her actions. Why would Anu try to conceal her identity and the location of the incident? Was it simply due to panic, or was she hiding a darker secret? The investigation widened as police turned to those close to Anu. A search of her phone uncovered surprising details. According to friends, Anu had been involved in multiple drug transactions with a mysterious man named Mr. T. In the days leading up to Joe's death, notably on the morning of October 26. The very day of the incident, Anu had purchased a large quantity of drugs. A classmate who happened to witness one of these transactions shared a key detail. Anu had previously asked about how to use drugs and the risks of an overdose. It's also worth noting that before the tragic event, Anu and her close friend Mavi Rao had hosted a few parties. At the first party, after Joe had fallen into a drunken sleep, Anu injected heroin into his vein, but did so incorrectly, allowing only a small amount to enter his system. Joe woke the next day feeling slightly nauseous. The second party on October 24 further fueled suspicions surrounding Anu. There, she revealed to friends that she had bought sedatives from someone named Carmermac and even inquired about dosage. Additionally, Anu had told a counselor that Joe was violent, a claim the police investigation later disproved. More notably, between October 24th and 26th, Anu made a large number of phone calls, mostly to Mavi Ralph, Carmack, Ryan, and a mysterious woman named Lucy. The police quickly reached out to these individuals for clarity. Mavi Rao was tight-lipped, but the others provided crucial information, painting a more complex picture of the case. The October 24th party wasn't just a casual gathering. It was the prelude to a sinister plan. Anu had leaked her intention to end both her life and Joe's to a few friends beforehand. Except for Joe, everyone at the party knew its true purpose. Yet, no one stepped in to stop it. The party stretched until around 3 a.m. before winding down, leaving only Anu, Joe, and Mavi. At dawn, Ralph left and confided in Lucy about Anu's horrific plan. According to Mavi, Anu intended to give Joe sleeping pills and inject him with drugs to kill them both. Lucy was shocked, unable to believe what she had heard. Immediately, Lucy called Anu to confront her. She couldn't accept such a cruel act and threatened to alert the police. Anu, however, denied the accusations, insisting she would never harm Joe and telling Lucy not to overthink things. Lucy felt confused by the conflicting information from Livy. Her lack of closeness with Anu made it hard to verify the story. Fearing she was being drawn into a prank, Lucy reached out to Ryan for more insight, but Ryan's response only deepened her unease. He seemed indifferent, assuring her everything would be fine. Distrusting Ryan's apathy, Lucy called Anu again. This time, Anu reacted with anger, threatening Lucy. She warned Lucy not to meddle in her personal affairs, promising trouble if Lucy dared to reveal anything. Faced with Anu's aggression and Ryan's indifference, Lucy felt powerless. She realized intervening might bring her more trouble. In the end, Lucy gave up, though her conscience remained tormented by her inaction. The reason behind Ryan's calm demeanor was later revealed. Anu had once told him a disturbing story. She claimed to have intentionally infected Joe with HIV by contaminating his toothbrush, but test results proved this was a lie. Perhaps because he was so used to Anu's baseless threats, Ryan no longer took her words seriously. After the October 24th party, Ryan confronted Anu about the rumors. She admitted to giving Joe sleeping pills, but insisted that was all. The next evening, when speaking with Joe, Ryan felt reassured hearing his friends say he was fine. However, the forensic examination exposed a harsh truth. Anu had secretly injected Joe with drugs while he was in a deep coma. Though the initial dose wasn't lethal, Anu persisted with her actions. When she realized Joe was dying, she panicked and called for help. To conceal her guilt, Anu deliberately provided misleading information, delaying the emergency response. Mavi Rao, Anu's close friend, wasn't just aware of the plan. She was an active accomplice. Mavi had given Anu $250 to buy the poison, directly implicating her in the crime. That's why Mavi had withheld information to protect herself. In reality, the events of October 24th weren't Anu's first attempt. Earlier on October 20th, she had tested her plan on Joe, but failed. This demonstrated Anu's chilling calculation and cold determination. the investigation gathered enough evidence to convict Anu. At her home, police found incriminating items like alcohol swabs, syringes, and, most crucially, a diary detailing Anu's 4-month-long planning process. You might be wondering why Anu wanted to drag Joe down with her. The root cause stemmed from deep-seated resentment. Anu believed Joe's suggestion to use a pack syrup for weight loss had caused her severe health issues. Though in truth, her problems were largely due to substance abuse. Anu blamed Joe for her suffering. But Anu's true motive was even more complex. Her suicidal ideation began in June, sparked by a book about liberation. The book's story of a surviving partner finding happiness after their loved one's death filled Anu with jealousy. She couldn't bear the thought of Joe moving on and loving someone else. So, she decided to take him with her to execute her cruel plan. Anu prepared meticulously. She acquired tools like a gun, poison, and sedatives. She even studied pharmacology to ensure her plan would succeed. In her diary, Anu wrote about learning to inject and feeling deep remorse for what she was about to do. She acknowledged Joe was a good person and that she didn't deserve him. She also worried about the pain Joe's parents would feel losing their son. The diary entries revealed a complex, conflicted psychological state. Anu was torn between her conscience and her vengeful despair, a fierce internal battle that shaped the entire case. With solid evidence and witness testimonies, the case swiftly went to trial. Initially, both Anu and Mavi faced charges. However, due to the case's complexity, the court decided to try the two defendants separately. Mavi was initially charged with serious crimes, including murder, manslaughter, and conspiracy to murder. But after a thorough review of the evidence, the court dismissed all charges. The ruling stated that Mavi's act of providing money to Anu wasn't enough to prove direct involvement in the murder. Ultimately, Mavi was released on a $100,000 Australian dollar bail, approximately $71,000 US at the 1999 exchange rate on November 5. The outcome of Ralph's trial sparked outrage, especially among Joe's family. They couldn't accept that a clear accomplice faced such a lenient penalty. Joe's parents felt deeply wounded, believing justice had not been served. Anu's trial followed, drawing intense public scrutiny. The families of both sides displayed starkly contrasting reactions. Anu's father staunchly believed in his daughter's innocence, insisting she was kind and fragile. Meanwhile, Joe's mother was consumed with anger, demanding the court deliver harsh punishment for the person who took her son's life. At the trial, Anu adamantly denied the murder charge. She claimed her intent was only to make Joe sleep deeply so she could end her own life without interference. She hadn't anticipated the drugs would have such a deadly effect. Anu's defense team recognized that acquittal was impossible. Instead, they focused on reducing her charges. They argued that Anu never intended to kill Joe from the start. When she realized the danger, she tried to save him. Thus, they urged the court to reconsider the charge, suggesting manslaughter instead of first-degree murder. Surprisingly, the prosecution presented a key piece of evidence: recorded call between Anu and Carmack. The recording revealed Anu's hesitation to call for help until Carmack urged her to. Furthermore, Anu's diary entries detailed a meticulously planned murder over 4 months, proving her actions were not impulsive, but a calculated crime. Yet, the defense countered with an unexpected argument. They claimed Anu suffered from severe mental disorders, including borderline personality disorder, major depression, and an eating disorder. At the time of the crime, her ability to control her actions was significantly impaired. The defense requested the court consider Anu's mental state and reduce her criminal responsibility. On June 24, 1999, the court delivered its final verdict. Based on Anu's unstable mental state and her brief attempt to save Joe, the court reduced the charge to manslaughter. Anu was sentenced to 10 years in prison with a minimum of 4 years before parole eligibility. The decision left Joe's family devastated and enraged. They couldn't accept that the person responsible for their son's death received such a lenient sentence. In her anguish, Joe's mother revealed a crucial piece of evidence, a note found in Joe's room that read, "Monday 27th, leave immediately." She believed this showed Joe planned to leave Anu, prompting Anu to kill him to stop him. However, the court didn't thoroughly review this evidence. The court's ruling sparked widespread public outrage. Many felt Anu's sentence was far too light for the crime she committed. A mere 4-year term for taking a life left people feeling that justice had been undermined. Some even suspected Anu had manipulated the trial using her knowledge of psychology. She had once told friends that convincing others she was mentally unstable wasn't difficult. The court's decision seemed to validate this claim. In October 2001, after serving 28 months, Anu was granted parole and returned to freedom. However, in April 2004, she was arrested again for violating parole conditions related to substance use. By August that year, she was released once more. During her imprisonment, Anu actively participated in rehabilitation programs and pursued a master's degree in criminology at the University of Sydney. After her release, she continued her academic journey, earning a PhD and publishing a notable dissertation on criminology. Her dissertation analyzed the social and psychological factors driving female criminality, focusing on issues like abuse, financial struggles, and mental health challenges. In her dissertation, Anu admitted to enduring a deeply difficult period and suffering from a severe mental illness. She also expressed profound regret and a desire to apologize to Joe's family. Joe's mother voiced her outrage at Anu's success. She believed Anu's research was merely a bid for attention, lacking sincerity. She declared she would never forgive Anu for taking her son's life, adding that she constantly thought of her son and grieved the future he was denied. Though the murder case concluded, public discourse continued to swirl around it. Several literary and cinematic works drew inspiration from the story, most notably Helen Garner's novel, Dear Murderer, published coincidentally around the time of Anu's release. The book captured public attention and stirred controversy. When news broke of Anu earning her PhD in law, many were incensed. They found it deeply ironic that a murderer could achieve such success. Online comments questioned justice and ethics, expressing concerns that Anu might use her legal knowledge to defend criminals. In the future, the case gradually faded from the spotlight, but its echoes lingered in public consciousness. Despite the internet being flooded with information, memories of the case seemed to dim over time. Today, Anu lives a quiet life in Sydney, while Mavi has started anew in the US under a different identity. Yet, unanswered. Questions about the case persist. That Anu, a convicted killer, could become an influential figure in the legal field outraged many. Why were law students willing to attend Anu's parties? This raised questions about the values and ethics within the legal profession. Psychologists pointed out that the bystander effect was a key factor in Joe's tragic death. This phenomenon shows that when someone is in distress in a crowd, the likelihood of receiving help decreases. People tend to assume someone else will step in, leading to a collective inaction where everyone thinks that way and ultimately no one acts. The indifference of those around Joe inadvertently contributed to his lack of timely help. We must learn from this tragedy. Instead of being passive witnesses, each of us should act proactively when someone is in need. Indifference can lead to devastating consequences. Story 5. Now we dive into a story steeped in tragedy and outrage sparked by a violent assault during a robbery that led to grievous injury and a heart-wrenching loss. A wife took the life of her husband, a high-ranking executive, leaving their 2 young children orphaned and adrift. The grandparents stepped in to care for the children only to face outrageous demands for exorbitant alimony. This is a tale of profound tragedy born from the collapse of a transnational marriage where 2 innocent children became pawns in an absurd farce mercilessly dragged through the unrelenting warfare of adults. The ground beneath them seemed to morph into a prison caging their childhood. March 20, 2017, Spring quietly arrived in Shanghai. A faint chill still lingered in the air. A petite woman stepped out of the elevator on the top floor of a building. She adjusted the backpack on her shoulder, took a deep breath, and decisively knocked on the door. The man who answered, dressed in casual home clothes, was Michael Simpson, a British national. He froze upon seeing the woman at his doorstep, none other than his wife, Fwy. Before Michael could react, Fwy stormed into the apartment with 2 companions. The room was eerily quiet, as if someone had just left. 2 steaming cups of tea sat on the coffee table. A woman's handbag lay carelessly strewn across the sofa, and peculiarly, the air carried the faint scent of an unfamiliar perfume. Fwy's eyes darted around her expression, hardening instantly. Where is she? Drag her out here, she demanded. Her companions shoved Michael aside aggressively, hurling accusations, interrogating him, and ransacking the apartment. Chaos erupted. At that moment, a woman emerged from the kitchen. She had long hair, delicate features, and wore an apron, as though she just finished cooking. There she is. Get her. One of Weiwei's companions shouted immediately, raising a phone to record. Their plan was to catch the alleged mistress red-handed to gather evidence and publicly humiliate her. But what unfolded next spiraled far beyond their control. Upon seeing the woman, Fwy pulled a knife from her bag and lunged forward, slashing viciously at the woman's arm. The woman screamed in agony and collapsed to the floor. Michael, in a frantic panic, rushed to her side, clutching her and pressing hard on the wound to stem the bleeding. He screamed, "Call an ambulance." Seeing her husband desperately protecting another woman, something inside Fwy snapped like a taut string stretched to its breaking point. Seizing the moment when Michael's focus was elsewhere, she raised the knife and struck down with force. One blow, then another. Each strike a release of pent-up fury, a judgment delivered. When a final stab pierced Michael's throat, he barely made a sound. His body stiffened, then crumpled to the floor like a machine, unplugged, blood pooling across the tiles. The two companions witnessing this horrific scene stood frozen. This wasn't some underworld showdown. It was a murder being filmed. Snapping out of their shock, they rushed to restrain Fui Wei and called the police. Fui Wei let go, the knife clattering to the floor. She collapsed, drained of all strength, sitting limply on the ground. The police arrived swiftly. The arrest was effortless. She didn't resist or attempt to flee. The murder weapon lay at her feet. This was the genesis of the tragedy. A tragedy ignited by jealousy and betrayal. A wife caught her husband, and a third party building a new life together, lost control of her emotions, and ended in murder. But the truth is far more intricate than it appears. Fui and Michael were not yet divorced, but their marriage was in name only. 2 years prior, they had agreed to a separation. At the time of the crime, they were in the process of finalizing their divorce. Those fatal stabs were less a crime of passion and more an eruption of long-simmering resentments. An unhinged final assault on a life spiraling out of control. To truly understand the roots of this tragedy, we must rewind 8 years to when they first met. Both were young, their lives on divergent paths. One was a high-flying executive newly appointed to a foreign company in China. The other was the top-performing saleswoman at a retail store. Their beginnings couldn't have been more different. Yet fate wove their paths together. In 2009, Next, one of Britain's largest clothing retailers, was expanding into China. The company sent a young, high-ranking executive to oversee its online and physical stores in the region. His name was Michael Simpson, not yet 30, already the regional head for China. Michael had an impeccable resume and a polished, eloquent demeanor, a quintessential British elite. At the time, Fui Wei was a sales associate at one of Next's stores. In her early 20s, she was vibrant and full of life. On that fateful day, Michael visited her store for a routine inspection. As the salesperson on duty, she was tasked with greeting the British executive. Facing the impeccably dressed foreign man with a calm, refined demeanor, she showed no trace of timidity. Instead, Fui Wei was relaxed, even playful. A single offhand joke from her was enough to make Michael Simpson burst into laughter. That was their first encounter. Her lively, charming, and confident nature left a lasting impression on him. Back at the office, Michael made a point to review Fui Wei's performance evaluations, her sales figures and customer satisfaction ratings were exceptional. During training sessions, he consistently called on her to share her sales expertise on stage. Fui Wei's presentations were dynamic and engaging, often leaving the audience chuckling. Michael clapped along. Their interactions grew frequent. Their connection deepened, and casual lunch meetings soon turned into dinner dates. Michael no longer felt like a stranger, adrift in a foreign land. He grew accustomed to someone remembering his dinners, reminding him to wear a jacket, and gradually he began to feel at home. For Fui Wei, she was no longer just a sales associate. She quietly stepped into the private life of the high-ranking foreign executive. Not long after she discovered she was pregnant, Michael embraced the unexpected arrival. of their child with joy. In November 2010, their son Jack was born, and the couple had a rushed wedding. On that day, Fwy in her wedding gown cradled tiny Jack and stood beside Michael, beaming with happiness. She was no longer the hired girl from the city's underclass. Everyone now called her Mrs. Simpson. After the marriage, Fwy decisively quit her job to become a full-time housewife. Michael's income was substantial and the family lived in an upscale apartment surrounded by elegance and affluence. Her social circle grew more refined. She flaunted her child designer handbags and afternoon teas, embodying the life of a wealthy, leisurely wife. Life seemed to glide by peacefully. But of course, the story doesn't end here. In the real world, few Cinderella tales have such idyllic endings. The truth is, from the moment they joined Hans's, cracks were already forming. A storm had been quietly brewing all along. This marriage lacked the blessing of both families. From the start, Fwy's parents felt Michael hadn't married their daughter according to Chinese customs. No dowry. No 3 golds, gold, silver, and gems. They wondered if the foreigner was ignorant of tradition or simply didn't value them. But their daughter was already pregnant. What could they do? On the other hand, Michael's father, Ian, harbored concerns. He didn't openly object, but his words carried warnings. Marrying too quickly, knowing too little about each other, coming from such different worlds. Don't let love cloud your judgment. His fears were not unfounded. Michael came from a quintessential British middle-class family. His father had been a senior manager at a major company, his mother an art enthusiast. Their home was filled with books, insurance policies, and education funds. Weekends meant picnics. Holidays meant travel. And the family bonded over football or exchanged Christmas cards. It was a household that valued structure, rationality, and long-term planning. Michael was raised in this environment following an elite path, top student, prestigious university, and a high-scoring graduate who landed a role at NEC's headquarters. He was diligent at work and cherished family life and its rituals. Fwy 5 years as junior seemed to come from another world entirely. Born in Nanjing County, Xianjiang City, Hub Province, China, she grew up in a small mountain town described as 8 parts mountains, half a river, half a field. Once listed among the province's poorest regions, her father scraped by repairing bicycles, and the family's meager income reinforced outdated values favoring sons over daughters. In such a household, vacations or planning were foreign concepts and fairness was scarce. With 2 children to raise, only one could afford schooling. Naturally, that opportunity went to her brother. After finishing middle school at 16, Fwy packed a backpack and left home to start her working life. Her early years were spent in grueling jobs, whitewashing, dishwashing, beauty services, massages, and cleaning. Her youthful vibrancy faded amid kitchen grease, damp rented rooms, and employer scoldings. A girl like her could only think about where to work tomorrow, or whether next month's rent was covered. Yet through this grind, she honed a keen ability to read people quickly, gauging their emotions and potential, whether they were just browsing or ready to swipe their card. This skill made her thrive in sales. And perhaps the moment Michael walked into her store, she recognized him as the turning point of her career, the shortcut to a new life. After their marriage, the couple did enjoy a brief honeymoon phase. But soon, their stark differences in worldview, values, and life's purpose began to surface. At first, becoming a full-time housewife was a relief for Fwivi. No more reading people's faces or worrying about her next job. But with that relief came a void. She lost her sense of purpose. She spent her days on her phone shopping compulsively and ignoring everything else. The house grew messy and her care for their child lacked devotion. Her life became increasingly to Michael. This woman was no longer the driven, lively, and open-hearted girl he'd known. Now she seemed like a rebellious teenager who just gained access to a credit card full of desires, but devoid of responsibility. When Michael brought Fwi to England for their first Christmas after marriage, he hoped she'd bond with his family. Instead, she spent the trip glued to her phone, barely engaging with his relatives and leaving childcare entirely to him. His father, Ian, complained to Michael. "She's 25, but her behavior and mindset are like a 16-year-old, so impulsive." This deeply embarrassed and disappointed Michael, a man who valued family ties. He began to question whether this woman truly understood the meaning of family at all. It wasn't just that Michael gradually noticed Fwivi's erratic moods. She also displayed a clear propensity for violence. During their last trip to England to visit family, Michael's father, Ian, spotted a scar on his son's forehead. After pressing for answers, Michael admitted it was from a plate Fwi had hurled at him during an argument. Ian fell silent for a few seconds before saying, "Maybe you should seriously consider divorce." In 2013, their daughter Alice was born, but the marriage showed no signs of improvement. Beyond emotional outbursts and physical altercations, they couldn't find any rhythm to harmonize their lives. Once able to talk about work, they now found even basic conversation a scarce resource. Michael was consumed with corporate strategies, parenting philosophies, and retirement accounts, while Fwivi fixated on the newest cafes or the best mall discounts. One was methodical, laying down tracks for a steady future. The other was impulsive, drifting on clouds, chasing fleeting views. Under the same roof, they lived like two isolated islands. As the fire of their once passionate love faded, their life descended into chaos. Michael, now clear-headed from the haze of blind love, wanted nothing more than to delete the account and exit the script. But ironically, the system was glitched, unremovable, and constantly flickering. He couldn't salvage the relationship. Resolute, he poured all his attention into their children, treating Fwi as if she were invisible, barely sparing her a glance. A Fwi, sidelined and ignored, grew restless and anxious. After Alice started kindergarten, the house felt like an empty shell. No one spoke to her. No one needed her. She felt like air, transparent to the point of vanishing. This void could have been an opportunity. She could have learned English to bridge the gap with Michael, or taken up a hobby to grow and distract herself. But she didn't think that way. Instead, she increasingly fled to nightclubs, drowning herself in alcohol, swiping cards for shopping sprees, seeking fleeting thrills to fill the emptiness, completely forgetting she was a mother of two. The rift widened. By February 2015, Michael could no longer endure it? He bluntly proposed divorce. Unsurprisingly, Fwy refused. In her eyes, despite their daily fights, she was still the respectable one among her friends. The wife of a high-flying foreign executive with a son and daughter, a handsome husband who provided for the family, the epitome of a victorious life. But divorce would strip her of that title, turning her from the radiant girl who married a Westerner into the pitiful woman abandoned by a foreigner. That reality was unthinkable. This time, however, Michael wasn't swayed by sentiment. He stood firm, stating clearly, "We'll separate, I'll cover your rent, provide monthly living expenses without fail, and I'll raise the kids, but you can visit them anytime." We sat in silence for an entire night before reluctantly agreeing. Deep down, both knew this separation was merely a temporary fix, a way to fend for themselves. Michael consulted a lawyer. Under Chinese marriage law, a 2-year separation could serve as solid evidence of irreconcilable differences. He planned to buy peace with money, intending to walk away cleanly after 2 years. To him, this marriage was a failed investment, and he was ready to cut his losses. But Fwy saw it differently. As long as the divorce papers remained unsigned, he was still her husband and there was room to maneuver. She even believed the separation could be a chance to reset. Men, she thought, only realized what they've lost when it's gone. Perhaps one day he'd return. Even after 2 years of separation, her Facebook name remained Wei Simpson. Her relationship status proudly set to married. Swallowing tears of resentment, she clung to a fragile, unconfirmed hope. She had no intention of letting go. Post-separation, Michael felt a palpable relief. From 2016, he frequently posted on social media, mostly pictures of outings with the kids' parks, Disneyland, Christmas visits to England. When their son reached school age, Michael enrolled him in Shanghai's top international school. It seemed he had fully escaped the chaos of their marriage, his life slowly returning to order. On the other side, Fwy wasn't faring badly either. Jobless yet financially supported, free from childcare and the need to play a husband, she filled her days with dining, shopping, and pampering. Her refined woman's life on Facebook never skipped a beat. On the surface, the once entangled couple had found stability, but those seemingly tranquil days were shattered on March 20, 2017. Just one day before the tragedy, Fwy, as usual, took the children out for a weekend outing. She even posted a picture of her son's drawing on Facebook, proudly captioning it, "He heartwarming mother-child time." The next morning, she dropped the kids off at Michael's house as usual. But this time, as she stepped through the door, her eyes immediately caught a strange handbag on the living room sofa. Its sleek design and elegant color weren't hers or her children's. It was a signal of intrusion. She froze. The air seemed to solidify for 3 seconds. In that moment, she realized another woman had been here. That woman was Rachel Lynn, also an employee at Next. Educated abroad, she shared Michael's global mindset. She was engaging, open, intellectual, yet unpretentious. Most importantly, she and Michael clicked genuinely, not superficially. Their conversations flowed effortlessly. Their wavelengths aligned. Over time, Michael developed feelings for Rachel Lynn and began pursuing her. Michael didn't hide his situation. He openly told Rachel Lynn that he and his wife had been separated for 2 years and were in the process of divorcing. Around Christmas 2016, they officially became a couple. By late January the 17th, they moved in together. In Western culture, separation often marks the emotional end of a marriage, with legal formalities seen as a mere delay. In that context, Michael didn't believe he was doing anything wrong. He considered himself free and saw starting a new relationship as entirely reasonable. But he overlooked one critical factor: status. In the land he lived in, it wasn't just about a cold legal document. It was about identity, dignity, and the final boundary in a woman's heart. In truth, as early as the beginning of 2017, Fwy had heard vague rumors about Michael's new girlfriend. But they were just that, rumors, distant and nebulous, stirring no real turmoil in her heart. That is until she saw the unfamiliar handbag on the sofa. Suddenly, the image of the other woman became concrete, not just existing, but boldly stepping into her home, openly replacing her as Mrs. Simpson. The last shred of illusion in her heart shattered. In that moment, and so unfolded the horrific scene described at the start of this story. After the murder, the police swiftly sealed off the crime scene. Downstairs, flashing police lights and a curious crowd buzzed like mosquitoes. Upstairs, Jack and Alice slept soundly in their room, unaware that hours later, their father would collapse in a pool of blood. Their mother would be handcuffed and taken away. In the span of one night's sleep, their home shattered. Their parents gone. Soon after, 2 officers quietly entered their room, woke them, and led them out, one on each side. No one spoke. No one told them what had happened. No one explained where their father had gone. Dressed in pajamas, the children were placed in a police car facing a group of strangers. Their lives derailed completely in that pitch black night. Meanwhile, across an ocean in distant England, Michael's father, Ian, received a voicemail from Rachel Lynn. The audio was faint. Her voice panicked with chaotic noise in the background. Michael's voice could be faintly heard, as if arguing. At first, Ian dismissed it, assuming they were drunk, and brushed it off. Hours later, another man called, his voice low and trembling, relaying Rachel Lynn's confirmation from the hospital. Michael was dead, killed by Fwy. Ian's wife, Linda, turned pale. The couple set aside their grief, hurriedly packed, and flew to Shanghai that night. When they finally saw Michael's cold, rigid body, their hearts tore apart. But before they could fully mourn, another devastating truth hit their grandchildren. Jack and Alice had vanished. The police informed Ian and Linda that the day after Michael's murder, the children were taken by Fwy's brother, Phua Chong, to Nanjang Hub, a tiny town on the map barely visible without zooming in, nearly 1,000 miles from Shanghai. Ian tried calling the Fu family, but no one answered. He resorted to sending messages, cards, books, and a specially made photo album chronicling Michael's life from childhood to adulthood, hoping the children would remember their father. But all efforts sank like stones in the sea, never reaching the children. Jack, who had been attending Shanghai's top international school, was now sent to the countryside. the environment, books and friends all changed. Yet the Fu family seemed unconcerned about how such drastic changes would affect the children. After repeated failed attempts to connect, Ian realized it wasn't just a lack of response. They were being deliberately blocked. He couldn't fathom why this family would do this. Their daughter had taken his son's life and now they wanted to erase his grandchildren from his life entirely. A Chinese lawyer explained that under Chinese law only parents can decide who cares for their children. After Fuiwei's imprisonment, she wrote a document designating her brother and father as the children's guardians. This became the legal basis for the Fu family's control over the children's fate. Without legal action, Ian's bloodline would be silently severed. In November 2017, Fu Wei's murder trial was approaching. Suddenly, the Fu family changed their stance, contacting Ian frequently with a sincere, almost submissive tone. They hoped he would write a letter of forgiveness to lighten Fuiwei's sentence. Ian rejected the request without hesitation, saying, at the trial, Fuiwei's lawyer argued it was self-defense, but Ian presented a British coroner's autopsy report showing Michael was attacked from behind. He sustained 4 stab wounds with his jugular vein, severed his subclavian artery ruptured, and his right lung's upper lobe torn. Each strike was lethal. This was no self-defense. It was an execution. Rachel Lynn was also severely injured with all 3 major nerves in her right arm, severed, resulting in permanent disability and muscle strength below grade 3. Faced with such ironclad evidence, Fuiwei had little chance of escaping conviction. She faced the death penalty and her family was liable for substantial compensation to Michael's family and Rachel Lynn. 4. The elderly Fu couple whose annual income was only a few thousand, this was an unimaginable sum. At this critical juncture, the Fu family's attitude softened. They agreed to let Ian see his grandchildren. On March 6, 2018, nearly a year after Michael's death, Ian finally met Jack and Alice at a hotel in Shiong. The reunion was limited to 6 hours, though brief, those hours were priceless to Ian. But the children's living conditions were worse than he'd imagined. They were cramped in a small bedroom with their cousins, a far cry from their life in Shanghai. The children didn't know their father was dead. Their maternal grandparents told them, "Your parents went abroad for work." In rural areas, this was a common lie. Too many children are left behind. The Fu family called it a kind lie, saying, "They're too young now. We'll tell them the truth when they're older." Ian couldn't accept this. To him, it wasn't protection. It misled the children into thinking their father didn't love them, that he'd abandoned them. Why else hadn't he called in so long? We have to tell the truth. All the experts say we should tell the children the truth. What enraged him further was that their uncle Fu Guang told the children, "Your paternal grandparents don't love you or want you, which is why they haven't visited." Jack and Alice, once fluent in English from living with their father, could no longer speak it. Ian brought a copy of The Wind in the Willows from England, Michael's favorite childhood book, hoping it might stir memories of their father. He sat on the sofa, reading softly and slowly. But Jack's eyes were vacant. He barely understood, mumbling a few words, unable to form a complete English sentence. In that moment, Ian's heart sank. he realized not only was his son gone, but the part of him living in his children's memories was being erased bit by bit. Ian flipped through a stack of old photo albums filled with pictures of Michael with his children when they were young. Jack stared at one photo for a long moment. His eyes slowly re-opened and in a soft voice he asked. The words struck Ian like a dull knife to the heart. He nearly said yes but couldn't. After this meeting, Ian's perspective shifted. He told the Fu family he was willing to provide a letter of leniency, forego all financial compensation, and even offer an additional $10,000, approximately $12,500 if they would allow the children to return to England for a better education and a normal life. But the Fu family refused. They said Fwy feared that once the children left for England, they would never return. Soon after, the Fu family's stance abruptly changed. Their lawyer contacted Ian stating the children could be released, but the conditions had escalated in addition to the letter of leniency. Ian must pay $63,000, approximately $78,750. The lawyer explained this was a deposit carefully calculated to ensure the children could return to China at least once a year, covering airfare, visas, accommodation, and living expenses. Ian realized then that to them custody was a bargaining chip to be monetized. The mastermind behind this demand was Fwy's brother Fwa Chang orchestrating everything. Linda Michael's mother recounted, they'd rather take money than secure a reduced sentence for their daughter from life imprisonment to 10 years. Furious, Ian told the lawyer, they took my son's life, and now they want me to pay to ransom my grandchildren. His lawyer warned, if you agree to this once, next time they might demand $1 million. And seeing no progress with the Fu family, Ian placed his final hope in Fwy. As the children's mother, she should want a better life for them. In truth, Fwy knew her illiterate parents couldn't teach or nurture the children. They couldn't tell stories, order takeout in English, or provide education and life planning. The judge presiding over the custody dispute personally visited Fwy in prison to hear her stance. She nodded, admitting that if the children went to England with their grandfather, their future might be brighter. She even said she hoped they would surpass her and have a promising life. Ian thought this signaled success. But Fwy still wouldn't budge. Despite her life hitting rock bottom, she refused to let her children go, closing the door to their hope with her own hands. Desperate, Ian decided to visit Fwy in prison himself. The visit was torture. He had no desire to face the woman who took his son's life. But for his grandchildren, he swallowed his pain. He described the children's situation. Jack and Alice were in rural Hube, living in poor conditions with substandard education. Alice, a young girl, shared a cramped bedroom with her cousins. Their distinct appearance made them targets of bullying by village children with no one to love or protect them. Ian, holding back tears, pleaded patiently, if they come to England, each will have their own room. Alice can take ballet lessons. Jack can join the Scouts and will hire a Chinese tutor so they don't forget their language. Every year we'll ensure they visit you in China. His words were sincere, devoid of blame, only begging her to relent. Yet Fwy refused. She remained calm throughout, offering no apology for Michael's death, only saying coldly, "The children's matters are for my family to decide." Her words chilled Ian's heart. With no room left for hesitation, he immediately refused to provide the letter of leniency. On July 9, 2018, the preliminary verdict was announced. Foy was sentenced to life imprisonment and ordered to pay $21,000 to Michael's family and $41,000 to Rachel Lynn in compensation. Ian's stance seemed to enrage the Fu family. They cut off all contact between him and the children, and the custody dispute reached a complete deadlock. In desperation, Ian turned to the British Embassy in China, but the staff said they were powerless. In prior transnational divorce cases, Chinese courts often favored local family members, especially when children had been living with their maternal grandparents for some time. The courts leaned toward maintaining the status quo. The custody battle dragged on for over a year, with the court stance clear. No forceful ruling, hoping both sides could negotiate. In plain terms, each side should compromise. Ian knew that without further action, he'd lose his grandchildren forever. He began seriously considering paying to secure them, despite the bitter resentment, as it seemed the only viable option. However, just as he showed slight willingness to compromise, the Fu family changed their terms again. They stated that even with payment, he could only take Alice, leaving Jack behind. Their shocking reason: Jack could care for his mother after her release, giving her support in old age. Ian nearly lost his composure. Not only did they want to cruelly split the siblings, but they also burdened Jack with a heavy responsibility from childhood. Was this raising a child or grooming a tool? It wasn't for the children's benefit, but to pave the way for their own future. Calming himself, Ian realized that securing Alice first was a significant step. Ultimately, he paid approximately $11 or $500 to gain custody of Alice, along with rights to regular video calls and annual visits with Jack. It was a transaction, but he had no other choice. The moment he retrieved Alice, Ian didn't hesitate, immediately getting into the car. As it drove away, he stared out the window, afraid to look back, fearing something might derail the moment. His heart swirled with conflicting emotions. Was this a victory or a defeat? He had finally brought his granddaughter home, but his grandson remained in the place he feared most. That night, Alice slept peacefully in the hotel room. Ian stood by the window, chain smoking. He knew this battle was far from over. Bringing Jack home would be his life's mission. After Michael's death, Ian had wanted countless times to write a letter to his son expressing his longing and remembrance, but he always lacked the courage to put pen to paper. The children were still not home, but on the flight back to England with Alice, he finally wrote that belated letter. At its end, he wrote, "Your daughter has your exact smile, a little star lighting up my world." Back in England, Ian and Alice's lives slowly brightened. Alice began speaking English again and showed a talent and love for painting. Every day, she video called her brother Jack via WeChat. Ian often appeared on the screen, reminding Jack to brush his teeth thoroughly and encouraging him to relearn English to prepare for the future. Off-screen, they continued working with lawyers in China to fight for Jack's custody. Ian knew the Fu family was impervious to reason, caring only for money, not people. He proposed a new offer, a one-time payment of $40,000, approximately $50,000 to Fui's account. By the time she was released from prison, the sum with interest could double, ensuring she wouldn't rely on Jack for support in her old age. Ian could have retired to enjoy his later years, but to care for his granddaughter and fight for his grandson. He returned to work in his 70s. He said, "Paying so much to those who took my son forever is agonizing, but if this money can bring Jack back to England to reunite with Alice, it's what I must do." Raising $40,000 quickly was no easy task. Neighbors launched a crowdfunding campaign called Ransom for Jack. Ian planned ahead. When Jack returned, the family would attend a Sunderland football match to gather Michael's favorite team. However, all updates on the case stopped in 2020. The media no longer reported on the family's situation. Has Jack returned to England? No one knows. Ian's social media shows no trace of Jack, suggesting they likely remain apart. His last update on April 1, 2023 was an old photo of Alice kissing Michael, captioned, "If you were still here, you'd be 41 now. Forever. Love you. Miss you." The next day was Michael's birthday. This post quietly reminds us that the pain this family endures may never fade. Looking back, this story has been told through Ian's perspective, drawn from his interviews. From Fu Wei's standpoint, she might have unspoken grievances. She was a victim of a patriarchal family, forced to drop out of school early and toil in menial jobs, enduring countless hardships. She may have suffered postpartum depression that Michael failed to notice. In their marriage, she might have felt neglected and ignored with no one to soothe her pain. But none of this is the children's fault. The most perplexing part is that Fwy clearly knew her family's limitations and the stark contrast in her children's living conditions. Yet she let them remain trapped, retracing the same path she once walked. Parental love should plan for a child's future. Yet she bound Jack's steps, blocking his path to a brighter life. The one silver lining in this tragedy lies in the Fu family's ingrained patriarchal mindset. Ironically, it gave Alice a chance to escape and start her own life. During video calls with her brother, Alice shared her excitement. "I'm starting primary school in England soon. I can't wait for you to come help me with my homework." Jack replied, "I'll come find you, but first I need to find our mom." Their innocence is heart-wrenching, but this shielded state won't last. After some time in England, Alice asked Ian, "Did Mom do something bad to Dad?" Following expert advice, Ian had a Chinese-speaking friend gently explain that their father had passed away and their mother was in prison. As for Jack, he'll turn 15 this year. In an age where information is easily accessible, he can't remain in the dark forever. Eventually, he'll learn about his parents' fate and the clash between their families, confronting a painful past hidden. And so, today's case comes to a close. This is the story of a failed transnational marriage. Some call it a chain reaction sparked by family dynamics, cultural clashes, and human nature. But from any angle, the tragedy's weight falls heaviest on the shoulders of two children. When the truth is revealed, they may feel anger, confusion, or grief. But we hope that when that day comes, they'll remember someone fought tirelessly for their freedom, dignity, and future. May the strength of that love become a flame, piercing the darkness, a faint light guiding their memories so they can ultimately break free from hardship and forge their own paths. As the rain gently falls and the night grows deeper. Thank you for joining me here at Mr. Night Cared. True crime. Stories remind us of life's mysteries and the importance of staying aware even as we seek comfort in the quiet of the night. Let the rain carry you to a peaceful sleep. And until we meet again, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night watch over you.